Some echoes outlive the empires that inspired them. Encircling the world's earliest settlements are remarkable accounts that refuse to fade, even under relentless archaeological scrutiny. Enigmatic relics, concealed passageways, and chronicles that blur the boundary between memory and reality continue to challenge every explanation. So sit back, relax, and let's immerse ourselves in 3 unforgettable hours of ancient urban legends that still confound researchers. Stone Street winds through the ancient quarters of Jerusalem, its worn paving polished by countless footsteps over many centuries. Weathered walls rise on either side, carrying layers of history carved by pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, and storytellers. Every corner seems to preserve an echo from another age. Here, where memory and tradition often intertwine, one enduring legend continues to capture the imagination: the tale of the Wandering Jew. According to medieval tradition, the story begins during the final journey of Jesus toward the site of the crucifixion. The legend tells of a man who mocked, insulted, or refused compassion to Jesus as he passed through the crowded streets carrying the cross. In response, the man was condemned to walk the earth until the second coming, never finding lasting rest, never escaping the passage of time. The identity of this mysterious figure has never remained consistent. Some versions call him Ahasuerus. Others describe him as Cartaphilus, a gatekeeper serving the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. Still, other traditions identify him simply as a cobbler, a merchant, or an ordinary resident whose brief encounter became an eternal burden. The changing names and occupations reveal something important. The legend was never tied to one historical individual. Instead, it evolved with each generation that repeated it. Unlike many ancient legends rooted in classical mythology, the tale of the Wandering Jew emerged during the medieval period. One of the earliest written references appears in the 13th century, when the English chronicler Roger of Wendover recorded an account involving an Armenian bishop who claimed to have met the immortal traveler. According to the bishop, the mysterious man appeared physically aged yet remained alive, wandering endlessly from one region to another. Whether this report reflected genuine belief, folklore, or literary invention remains uncertain, but it helped spread the legend throughout Europe. As the centuries passed, reports multiplied. Travelers occasionally claimed to encounter an elderly stranger who possessed impossible knowledge of distant eras. Some described a quiet man who avoided remaining in one place for long. Others insisted he spoke numerous languages with remarkable fluency, as though centuries of travel had allowed him to witness history firsthand. Naturally, historians approach these stories with caution. No contemporary records from the 1st century describe such a figure. The earliest surviving accounts appear many hundreds of years after the events they describe, leaving an enormous historical gap. Most scholars regard the Wandering Jew as a legendary character whose story gradually expanded through oral tradition, religious teaching, and medieval literature. Yet, even after acknowledging those facts, intriguing questions remain. Why did this particular legend spread so widely across different kingdoms and cultures? Why did independent communities preserve remarkably similar themes despite adapting the details? Legends often fade when societies change, yet this one persisted through wars, political upheaval, and shifting religious traditions. Some researchers suggest the story reflects humanity's fascination with immortality, not as a gift, but as an unbearable sentence. Endless life, stripped of peace, becomes a powerful metaphor for guilt, memory, and the inability to escape one's past. In this interpretation, the wandering figure represents universal themes rather than an actual individual. Others examine the legend through the lens of folklore. Throughout history, mysterious travelers have appeared in countless traditions. A solitary stranger arriving without clear origins naturally invites speculation, especially in periods when communication between distant regions was limited. An unusually well-traveled person with knowledge of foreign lands could easily become surrounded by extraordinary stories. Beyond these mainstream interpretations lie more speculative ideas. Some writers have proposed that the legend preserves distorted memories of a real historical figure whose unusually long life became exaggerated over generations. Others wonder whether repeated sightings describe different individuals adopting the same identity, intentionally continuing a story that had already entered popular imagination. There are also theories connecting the legend to broader traditions involving immortal witnesses, figures destined to observe the unfolding of history without participating in it. Similar motifs appear in various cultures, where mysterious wanderers emerge briefly during moments of crisis before disappearing once again. Whether these similarities point to shared storytelling traditions or something more elusive remains an open question. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether one immortal traveler truly walked the roads of history, but why the image continues to resonate so deeply. Every era seems willing to imagine a silent observer standing just beyond the edge of recorded history, watching kingdoms rise, faiths evolve, and generations pass. Somewhere between documented history and enduring folklore, the footsteps of the wandering Jew continue to echo, leaving one lingering question behind. If every legend contains at least a fragment of truth, what fragment might still remain undiscovered? At sunrise, the desert appears almost motionless. Rolling dunes stretch toward a shimmering horizon, interrupted only by weathered rock formations and the occasional dry wash carved by floods long since forgotten. Wind erases footprints within hours, smoothing the surface into an almost untouched landscape. Yet, beneath this shifting blanket of sand, some believe an entire settlement may still lie concealed, waiting for the right moment or the right technology to reveal itself. Stories of hidden cities have circulated throughout the American Southwest since the earliest days of European exploration. Prospectors, military scouts, ranchers, and indigenous communities all passed along accounts of unusual stone structures glimpsed in remote country before disappearing from view. Some described stairways descending into the earth. Others recalled walls emerging after powerful storms, only to vanish again beneath drifting sand and sediment. Modern archaeology confirms that the deserts of the American West were never empty. Long before frontier towns appeared, complex societies built thriving communities adapted to remarkably harsh conditions. The ancestral Pueblo peoples constructed impressive stone settlements, while the Hohokam developed sophisticated irrigation canals capable of supporting large populations in what would otherwise seem inhospitable terrain. These discoveries demonstrate that remarkable engineering flourished where many early travelers expected only wilderness. Even so, legends persist that speak of something larger. Among the most enduring accounts are tales of an immense underground settlement hidden somewhere within the deserts bordering Arizona, New Mexico, or northern Mexico. Descriptions vary considerably. Some portray an elaborate network of chambers connected by carved passageways. Others speak of ceremonial halls filled with carefully worked stone, untouched by modern development. Reliable evidence remains elusive. No verified excavation has uncovered a vast underground metropolis matching these stories. Researchers generally attribute such legends to a combination of misunderstood geological formations, abandoned indigenous structures, mining tunnels, and the tendency for oral traditions to evolve over generations. Yet, certain discoveries continue to encourage curiosity. Throughout the Southwest, archaeologists have documented caves modified by ancient inhabitants, cliff dwellings extending deep into sandstone walls, and ceremonial chambers known as kivas that descend below ground level. These are genuine architectural achievements, demonstrating that building beneath the surface was both practical and culturally significant in many communities. Natural geology also plays an important role. Vast cave systems, lava tubes, and fractured rock layers extend beneath portions of the region. Some remain only partially explored because unstable terrain, narrow passages, and environmental protections limit access. In places where erosion periodically exposes buried features before covering them once again, separating natural formations from archaeological sites becomes an ongoing challenge. Adding to the mystery are occasional reports from explorers and survey crews who have described encountering worked stone in isolated locations. In several instances, later expeditions failed to relocate the same features. Shifting dunes, seasonal flooding, inaccurate navigation, or simple misidentification may explain many of these accounts. Even so, the repeated pattern has allowed the legend to endure. The development of satellite imagery, aerial photography, ground-penetrating radar, and LiDAR has transformed archaeological research across the world. Hidden settlements have been identified beneath forests, farmland, and dense vegetation using technologies unavailable only a few decades ago. Researchers continue applying these methods throughout parts of the American West, occasionally identifying ancient roads, habitation sites, and irrigation systems previously invisible from the ground. Could similar technology one day reveal something even more unexpected beneath layers of desert sediment? More speculative theories venture considerably further. Some suggest the hidden city belonged to an unknown civilization, predating recognized cultures of the Southwest. Others propose connections to forgotten mining expeditions, secret religious communities, or travelers whose settlements disappeared after prolonged drought. A handful of fringe writers have even imagined vast subterranean networks extending for hundreds of miles beneath the region. None of these ideas has been supported by convincing archaeological evidence, yet they continue to circulate because the landscape itself seems capable of inspiring extraordinary possibilities. Indigenous oral traditions add another layer of complexity. Many nations preserve stories involving sacred places beneath the earth, emergence narratives, or protected ceremonial locations. Historians emphasize that these traditions carry profound cultural and spiritual meaning and should not automatically be interpreted as literal descriptions of hidden cities. Nevertheless, their existence reminds us that the desert has always been understood as a place where visible and invisible histories coexist. Perhaps that is why the mystery continues to attract attention. Every new survey uncovers another fragment of the past, while immense stretches of remote terrain remain largely undisturbed. The desert reveals its history slowly, one discovery at a time, often raising new questions before answering old ones. Whether the legendary buried city exists only within generations of storytelling, or whether remnants still rest beneath the shifting sands, remains uncertain. For now, the silence of the landscape keeps its deepest secrets remarkably well. Deep within an ancient stone chamber, the air feels heavy with age. Dust rests undisturbed across carved walls, while narrow passages allow only faint traces of daylight to reach the interior. In such places, even the smallest flame would seem extraordinary. Yet, for centuries, travelers and chroniclers have repeated remarkable accounts of lamps that supposedly continued burning long after those who lit them had disappeared from history. Known collectively as the eternal lamps, these mysterious lights occupy a unique place between archaeology, folklore, and historical speculation. Unlike legends tied to a single location, stories of ever-burning lamps appear throughout Europe, North Africa, and parts of the Middle East. Their details vary, but the central claim remains remarkably consistent. Hidden within sealed tombs, underground vaults, or forgotten temples, Explorers allegedly discovered lamps still producing light, despite having remained untouched for generations. The earliest written references trace back to classical antiquity. Greek and Roman authors occasionally described sacred flames maintained within temples for religious purposes. These fires symbolized continuity, divine protection, or civic identity, and attendants carefully replenished them with fresh fuel. Such practices are well documented and supported by historical evidence. The mystery begins when later writers described something very different. During the medieval and Renaissance periods, numerous accounts appeared claiming that sealed burial chambers contained lamps still burning when first opened. According to these stories, the light would often extinguish almost immediately after fresh air entered the chamber, leaving observers astonished and unable to explain what they had witnessed. One frequently repeated tale concerns the supposed discovery of an illuminated tomb along the Appian Way near Rome. Various versions describe workers opening an ancient burial chamber to reveal an intact lamp shining beside the remains within. Similar stories emerged from other parts of Europe, each differing in important details but sharing the same extraordinary theme. Historians face an immediate challenge when examining these reports. Most survive only through second-hand or even third-hand accounts. Original witnesses are often impossible to identify, while later authors sometimes repeated earlier stories without verifying their accuracy. In many cases, the precise location of the alleged discoveries remains uncertain. Nevertheless, the persistence of these accounts has continued to inspire investigation. From a practical perspective, modern science offers several possible explanations. Ancient civilizations possessed impressive knowledge of oils, waxes, mineral fuels, and lamp construction. Some lamps, carefully sealed from wind and supplied with sufficient fuel, could burn for surprisingly long periods. However, no known technology from antiquity, or today, could sustain an ordinary flame continuously for hundreds or thousands of years without replenishment. This limitation has led many researchers to conclude that the reports were likely exaggerated, misunderstood, or entirely legendary. Another possibility involves unusual chemical reactions. Certain naturally occurring minerals can emit faint light through processes such as phosphorescence or chemiluminescence. Under rare conditions, decaying organic material and specific gases may also produce weak illumination. Someone entering a sealed chamber with limited visibility might interpret such effects as evidence of a burning lamp, especially if expectations were already shaped by local tradition. Some scholars point towards symbolic storytelling rather than literal observation. Throughout history, light has represented knowledge, immortality, wisdom, and divine presence. An everlasting flame serves as a powerful literary image, expressing the idea that memory can survive long after human life has ended. In this interpretation, eternal lamps function less as historical objects and more as enduring metaphors woven into religious and cultural traditions. Yet, the mystery does not end there. More speculative theories occasionally appear in fringe literature. Some writers suggest ancient engineers discovered advanced fuel sources now forgotten by history. Others imagine unknown chemical compounds capable of sustaining combustion for extraordinary lengths of time. A few even propose that descriptions of the lamps preserve misunderstood observations of technologies entirely unrelated to ordinary fire. None of these proposals has been supported by verifiable archaeological evidence. No authenticated eternal lamp has ever been recovered, studied, and demonstrated to operate according to the legendary descriptions. Even so, the absence of physical proof has done little to diminish public fascination. Part of that fascination may stem from the remarkable achievements ancient civilizations unquestionably accomplished. They erected monuments that continue to endure after thousands of years. mastered metallurgy, engineered aqueducts, developed complex calendars, and created pigments whose compositions still surprise researchers. Each confirmed accomplishment reminds us that historical knowledge was often more sophisticated than once believed. That realization naturally encourages people to wonder whether other forgotten techniques might have briefly existed before disappearing altogether. Archaeologists continue uncovering sealed tombs and long-hidden chambers across the ancient world, each offering carefully preserved glimpses into lives separated from our own by centuries. Most discoveries produce answers grounded firmly in evidence. Occasionally, however, they also revive old stories that refuse to fade. Whether the eternal lamps were misunderstood observations, symbolic narratives, or reflections of knowledge now lost to time remains uncertain. Somewhere between documented history and enduring tradition, the image of an unwavering flame continues to flicker, inviting us to consider how many chapters of the past may still lie beyond our understanding. The entrance stands hidden against a weathered cliff, its carved doorway almost indistinguishable from the surrounding stone. Beyond it lies a narrow passage descending into cool darkness, where painted walls preserve vivid scenes untouched by sunlight for thousands of years. Every chamber reflects extraordinary craftsmanship, from finely carved sarcophagi to carefully arranged burial offerings. These places were designed not merely as graves, but as eternal homes, intended to protect both memory and spirit long after earthly life had ended. Among the countless stories connected to ancient Egypt, few have captured the public imagination more powerfully than the legend of the cursed mummy. For generations, books, newspapers, films, and documentaries have repeated accounts of mysterious illnesses, sudden deaths, and unexplained misfortune said to follow those who entered royal tombs. The idea has become so familiar that many people assume such curses were a genuine feature of every ancient burial. The historical reality, however, is far more complex. Ancient Egyptian burial practices were deeply connected to religious beliefs concerning the afterlife. Great care was taken to preserve the body through mummification, while tombs were filled with objects intended to assist the deceased on their journey beyond death. Protective inscriptions occasionally appeared within these burial sites, invoking divine guardians or warning against those who might damage sacred property. These inscriptions served primarily as spiritual protections rather than dramatic threats aimed at future archaeologists. The modern image of a deadly mummy's curse emerged much later. Interest in Egyptian antiquities expanded dramatically during the 19th and early 20th centuries as archaeological expeditions uncovered spectacular monuments and royal burials. Newspapers eagerly reported each discovery, often blending factual information with dramatic storytelling. Public fascination grew even stronger after the discovery of the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun by Howard Carter in 1922. Within months of the excavation, several individuals associated with the expedition died under unrelated circumstances. The most widely reported was Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financial supporter, who succumbed to an infection following a mosquito bite that became severely inflamed. His death attracted enormous media attention, and journalists quickly linked it to rumors of an ancient curse protecting the young king's resting place. As additional members of the expedition passed away over subsequent decades, newspapers frequently suggested supernatural connections. Yet historians note that many participants lived long, healthy lives after the excavation, including Howard Carter himself, who survived for many years following the discovery. When the complete record is examined, the pattern appears considerably less mysterious than early headlines suggested. Even so, the legend continued to grow. Some researchers argue that psychological factors may have played an important role. Powerful expectations can influence perception, particularly in unfamiliar environments filled with cultural significance. Individuals convinced they had disturbed something sacred might interpret ordinary illness or coincidence through the lens of supernatural belief. Once the idea of a curse became widely accepted, each unfortunate event naturally reinforced the narrative. Scientific explanations have also been proposed. Sealed tombs may contain mold spores, bacteria, or airborne fungi capable of affecting human health, particularly in enclosed spaces with limited ventilation. Certain microorganisms can survive for extended periods under favorable conditions, and exposure may cause respiratory illness in susceptible individuals. While such hazards cannot explain every story connected with alleged curses, they demonstrate that ancient burial chambers sometimes contain genuine environmental risks. The inscriptions themselves have often been misunderstood. Contrary to popular belief, explicit warnings promising supernatural death to anyone entering a tomb are relatively rare. Most texts focus instead on religious devotion, prayers for the deceased, or appeals to protective deities. Over time, dramatic translations and fictional embellishments transformed these inscriptions into something far more ominous than their original meaning. Beyond mainstream scholarship lie more speculative ideas. Some suggest the curse represents forgotten knowledge deliberately concealed by ancient priesthoods. Others wonder whether burial chambers incorporated substances or architectural designs intended to discourage intruders in ways not fully understood today. A handful of writers even propose that repeated reports of unusual experiences inside certain tombs hint at phenomena beyond conventional explanation. None of these theories has been supported by reliable archaeological evidence, but they continue to circulate because the mystery itself remains compelling. Perhaps the lasting appeal of the cursed mummy lies not in the question of whether supernatural punishment truly exists, but in what these stories reveal about humanity's relationship with the past. Ancient tombs were never built for modern curiosity. They were sacred places, created with extraordinary care for individuals who expected eternal peace. Every excavation, therefore, raises difficult questions about preservation, respect, and the boundaries between discovery and disturbance. Today, archaeologists continue to explore burial sites with increasingly advanced technology, uncovering remarkable insights into ancient civilization while carefully protecting fragile remains. Each new discovery replaces myth with evidence in some areas, yet somehow the legend refuses to disappear entirely. Whether the curse belongs solely to folklore, arose from misunderstood events, or preserves a forgotten warning that history has yet to fully explain remains uncertain. In the quiet darkness of those ancient chambers, the unanswered questions seem almost as enduring as the mummies themselves. Morning mist hangs low across an empty valley, softening the outlines of distant hills and turning scattered trees into shadowy silhouettes. The landscape is quiet now, disturbed only by the wind passing through dry grass. Yet, for countless generations, battlefields like these have inspired extraordinary stories. Long after the fighting ended, travelers claimed to hear marching footsteps, the clash of steel, and commands carried on the breeze. Some even insisted they witnessed entire formations of soldiers moving across the landscape, only for the figures to disappear without leaving a trace. These accounts are often grouped under a single name: the Phantom Army. Legends of ghostly armies appear throughout Europe and beyond, stretching back many centuries. Medieval chronicles describe mysterious companies of armed men crossing hillsides during the night. Rural communities spoke of spectral cavalry riding beneath moonlit skies, while isolated shepherds reported hearing invisible columns advancing through mountain passes. Although the locations and details differ, many of these stories share a striking pattern. The armies rarely interact with observers. Instead, they seem locked in an endless reenactment of events long since completed. One of the most famous traditions comes from England, where stories surrounding the Battle of Edgehill have circulated since the 17th century. According to contemporary reports, local residents claimed that on several occasions after the battle, they witnessed ghostly soldiers fighting once again across the fields. Some descriptions even mention recognizable officers leading their men exactly as they had during the original conflict. Historical documents confirm that unusual reports were taken seriously enough for investigators to examine the claims. However, no physical evidence was ever found to support the existence of supernatural armies. The stories survived largely through written testimony and local tradition, rather than verifiable observation. Similar legends appear elsewhere. In parts of Scandinavia, folklore tells of the Wild Hunt, an otherworldly procession sweeping across the sky or racing through forests during certain seasons. Although often associated with supernatural leaders rather than historical battles, these tales share the image of large spectral gatherings moving with purpose through the landscape. In Germany, Ireland, and Scotland, stories describe phantom regiments appearing shortly before periods of conflict or political upheaval. Whether these accounts reflected genuine belief, symbolic storytelling, or attempts to explain unusual natural events remains difficult to determine. Historians generally approach these reports as examples of folklore shaped by collective memory. Battlefields occupy a unique place within cultural history. They are locations where communities experienced profound loss, heroism, and tragedy. Over time, memories preserved through oral tradition may gradually transform into stories in which the past never fully releases its hold upon the landscape. Psychology offers another perspective. Human perception can be remarkably sensitive to expectation, especially in places already associated with dramatic historical events. Under conditions of fog, fading light, or emotional anticipation, ordinary sights and sounds may be interpreted in unexpected ways. Distant groups of travelers, shifting shadows, echoes, or atmospheric effects can sometimes produce convincing illusions without requiring anything supernatural. Environmental conditions may also contribute. Temperature inversions occasionally carry sound across remarkable distances, allowing conversations, machinery, or footsteps from far away to seem strangely close. Certain weather patterns create optical phenomena that distort objects near the horizon, making distant figures appear suspended, enlarged, or unexpectedly numerous. Although these effects cannot account for every historical report, they provide plausible explanations for at least some observations. Yet, not every detail fits comfortably within conventional interpretations. Several historical accounts describe multiple witnesses reporting remarkably similar experiences at the same time. In some cases, observers claimed they independently described identical formations, banners, or military movements before comparing their stories afterward. Documentation surrounding such events is often incomplete, making independent verification impossible. But these recurring elements continue to attract attention from researchers interested in historical folklore. More speculative theories move beyond psychology and atmospheric science. Some suggest that emotionally significant events might somehow become imprinted upon particular locations, occasionally replaying under unknown environmental conditions. Others propose that the reports hint at aspects of human perception not yet fully understood. These ideas remain highly speculative and are not supported by established scientific evidence, but they continue to appear in discussions surrounding unexplained historical phenomena. Perhaps the enduring fascination with phantom armies reflects something deeper than questions about ghosts. Throughout history, warfare has shaped civilizations, altered borders, and transformed countless lives. Landscapes that witnessed extraordinary suffering often become places where memory feels unusually vivid, encouraging generations to imagine that echoes of those moments still linger. Today, many of these former battlefields have become peaceful countryside, visited by hikers, historians, and archaeologists rather than soldiers. The sounds of conflict have long since faded, replaced by birdsong and quiet winds moving through open fields. Yet, every so often, another story emerges, a distant line of marching figures glimpsed through morning fog, the faint rhythm of drums where no musicians stand, or the impression that history itself has briefly stepped back into view. Whether these accounts arise from folklore, unusual natural conditions, or something still beyond explanation remains uncertain, leaving the mystery of the Phantom Army to continue its silent march through history. A long ribbon of dust stretches across the horizon as the afternoon sun hangs over a vast expanse of open country. Wagon tracks cut through dry earth before gradually fading into rocky ground, where wind and weather erase nearly every sign of those who once passed this way. For centuries, caravans served as lifelines between distant settlements, carrying merchants, livestock, supplies, and news across immense distances. Most reached their destinations after weeks or even months of difficult travel. A few, however, entered history for a very different reason. They simply disappeared. The mystery of the Vanishing Caravan appears in many forms throughout historical records and regional folklore. Some stories unfold along the famous trade routes of Central Asia, while others emerge from the deserts of North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, or remote crossings in the American West. Despite the differences in setting, the central question remains remarkably similar. How could an entire group of travelers, often numbering dozens of people and animals, vanish with so little trace? History offers many documented examples of caravans facing extraordinary danger. Harsh weather, water shortages, disease, hostile encounters, and navigational errors claimed countless lives long before modern transportation transformed long-distance travel. Archaeological discoveries have revealed abandoned campsites, scattered cargo, and isolated human remains that testify to the genuine risks faced by those who ventured into remote landscapes. Yet, some accounts describe circumstances that appear far more puzzling. Several 19th-century frontier journals mention trading parties expected to arrive at established outposts, but never appearing. Search teams occasionally located abandoned wagons or partial trails that ended abruptly against rocky terrain. In other cases, no convincing evidence emerged at all. Similar reports appear in older chronicles describing camel caravans crossing immense deserts, where experienced guides seemingly vanished alongside every member of their expedition. Researchers caution that many of these stories survive only through fragmented records. Frontier communication was often unreliable, maps remained incomplete, and distances between settlements could span hundreds of miles. A delayed caravan might alter its route, establish a new destination, or suffer an accident far beyond the reach of organized search efforts. Over time, incomplete information could easily evolve into enduring mystery. The natural environment itself provides several possible explanations. Deserts and open plains possess an extraordinary ability to erase evidence. Powerful sandstorms can bury campsites within hours. Seasonal floods may sweep away equipment and remains before depositing layers of sediment over the landscape. In mountainous regions, landslides and rockfalls can conceal entire sections of ancient pathways. Even on relatively open ground, decades of erosion gradually remove many signs of human activity. Modern archaeology has repeatedly demonstrated how easily entire settlements can remain hidden beneath shifting terrain for centuries. If permanent communities can disappear beneath the landscape, temporary caravans carrying portable equipment become even more difficult to locate. Navigation also presented constant challenges. Before satellite positioning or detailed topographic maps, travelers relied upon landmarks, stars, and local knowledge. Unexpected weather could obscure familiar reference points, while drought might eliminate reliable water sources. A single navigational mistake in an isolated region could place an expedition beyond any realistic chance of rescue. Still, certain stories continue to resist simple explanation. Some legends describe search parties following fresh tracks that suddenly ended without obvious cause. Others speak of camps discovered with supplies left undisturbed, yet no sign of the people who had supposedly occupied them only days earlier. Such accounts cannot usually be verified through surviving evidence, but their persistence has ensured their place within regional folklore. A number of historians believe these stories gradually absorbed details from multiple unrelated events. Rather than describing one extraordinary disappearance, a single legend may preserve fragments of numerous real incidents combined through decades of oral tradition. This process is common in folklore, where repeated retelling often blends historical memory with dramatic narrative. More speculative theories venture further. Some suggest hidden canyons, collapsed cave systems, or concealed valleys may have trapped travelers beyond the view of searchers. Others imagine encounters with isolated groups whose histories were never recorded in written sources. A handful of fringe writers even propose unexplained natural phenomena capable of disorienting entire expeditions. While such ideas remain unsupported by reliable evidence, they continue to attract attention because they attempt to answer questions that conventional explanations cannot always resolve completely. Perhaps the greatest challenge lies in the sheer scale of the landscapes involved. Even today, enormous regions of desert, canyon country, and remote wilderness remain difficult to survey thoroughly. Archaeologists continue discovering long-forgotten trails, abandoned camps, and isolated artifacts in places once believed to hold no evidence of past travel. Each discovery demonstrates how easily history can remain concealed when nature has centuries to reclaim the land. For every caravan that safely completed its journey, countless others faced uncertainty beyond the horizon. Most left behind records, ruins, or descendants who preserved their stories. A small number, however, seem to have slipped quietly beyond the reach of both memory and evidence. Whether these disappearances resulted from natural disasters, human conflict, simple misfortune, or circumstances still waiting to be uncovered remains uncertain. Somewhere along those weathered trails, erased almost completely by time, the missing footsteps of the vanishing caravan may still be waiting for someone to find them. Far from the shoreline, the sea reveals little of what lies beneath its surface. Gentle waves conceal towering underwater cliffs, ancient reefs, and the silent remains of countless ships that never return to port. Every tide reshapes the coastline, while powerful currents carry wreckage far from the place where disaster first unfolded. For archaeologists, the ocean is not merely a body of water. It is one of history's largest and least explored archives. Hidden within its depths are vessels that carried merchants, soldiers, explorers, and pilgrims, many of them still waiting to be discovered. Among the most enduring maritime legends is the story of the ghost ship of Antiquity. Unlike famous phantom vessels associated with later centuries, this mystery reaches much further into the ancient world, where incomplete records and unexplored seabeds leave ample room for both careful investigation and enduring speculation. Ancient civilizations depended heavily on maritime trade. Egyptian, Phoenician, Greek, Roman, and Carthaginian sailors established vast networks connecting distant ports across the Mediterranean and beyond. Archaeological discoveries have revealed cargoes of wine amphorae, bronze statues, marble columns, glassware, and precious metals resting on the seafloor, preserved for thousands of years beneath layers of sand and sediment. These discoveries confirm an important truth. Thousands of ships were lost during Antiquity. Most disappearances have ordinary explanations. Sudden storms, hidden reefs, navigational errors, piracy, structural failures, and accidental fires posed constant dangers to wooden vessels. Ancient ships lacked modern forecasting and communication, making every voyage a calculated risk. Many wrecks remained unknown simply because no survivors returned to describe what had happened. Yet some accounts proved far more unusual. Several Greek and Roman writers described reports of abandoned vessels encountered far from land. According to these narratives, ships were found drifting without visible crews, their cargoes still aboard and their sails damaged by wind and weather. In certain stories, nearby sailors refused to board the vessels, believing they carried misfortune or divine warning. Whether these accounts reflected genuine observations or literary symbolism remains uncertain, but they contributed to the enduring image of the ghost ship. One recurring tradition speaks of merchant vessels that appeared unexpectedly after storms, only to disappear again before anyone could approach them closely. Sailors described weathered hulls bearing unfamiliar markings or outdated designs that seemed to belong to another era. Such stories naturally became more elaborate with each retelling, especially among communities whose livelihoods depended upon the sea. Historians generally interpret these reports through practical explanations. A damaged vessel could remain afloat for surprisingly long periods if its hull remained largely intact. Ocean currents and prevailing winds sometimes carried abandoned ships hundreds of miles from the site where their crews had evacuated or perished. Mariners encountering such vessels under difficult weather conditions might easily interpret an ordinary drifting wreck as something far more mysterious. The sea itself contributes to these illusions. Fog banks, shifting light, and atmospheric refraction occasionally distort distant objects in remarkable ways. A phenomenon known as superior mirage can make ships appear suspended above the horizon or strangely elongated, while rapidly changing visibility may cause vessels to seem as though they have appeared or vanished almost instantly. Before these optical effects were scientifically understood, such experiences naturally encouraged extraordinary interpretations. Archaeology has also revealed how incomplete the historical record remains. Modern underwater surveys continue to discover ancient wrecks in astonishing states of preservation. Some still contain cargo arranged almost exactly as it was loaded more than 2,000 years ago. Others rest so deeply buried beneath sediment that only advanced sonar and remotely operated vehicles can detect their presence. Each new discovery demonstrates that much of the ancient maritime world still lies beyond direct observation. More speculative theories occasionally suggest that certain legendary ghost ships preserve distorted memories of real expeditions that disappeared under exceptional circumstances. Others wonder whether isolated encounters with unusually well-preserved abandoned vessels gradually evolved into stories of supernatural craft endlessly roaming the sea. A small number of writers even speculate about lost trading fleets whose final destinations have never been identified through archaeology. None of these ideas has been confirmed by reliable evidence, yet they continue to inspire discussion because vast portions of the ancient seafloor remain unexplored. Maritime historians often emphasize that the ocean keeps secrets unlike any found on land. Wooden ships decay, currents scatter cargo, marine organisms reshape wreck sites, and earthquakes can bury entire harbors beneath layers of sediment. Even when a ship is eventually located, reconstructing its final voyage often requires decades of patient research involving archaeology, geology, chemistry, and ancient historical records. Perhaps that is why the legend of the ghost ship of Antiquity continues to endure. It reflects not only humanity's fascination with unexplained disappearances, but also the immense scale of what remains hidden beneath the waves. Every expedition uncovers another fragment of the past, yet countless miles of seafloor have never been carefully examined. Somewhere in that silent underwater world, preserved by darkness and time, ancient vessels may still rest exactly where their final journey ended, waiting for the moment when history finally finds them. A narrow road stretches toward the horizon, bordered by weathered stones that have marked the route for centuries. The dust is undisturbed except for faint footprints disappearing into the distance. Travelers once passed here every day, carrying goods, letters, and stories from one settlement to another. Yet, according to a collection of enduring legends, not every traveler who appeared along these roads was entirely ordinary. Some were remembered for one impossible detail. Those who claimed to encounter them insisted they had no face. The mystery of the Faceless Travelers belongs to a curious category of folklore that appears in many cultures. Unlike stories centered on haunted houses or cursed objects, these accounts involve anonymous figures encountered during ordinary journeys. Witnesses often describe them as dressed in common clothing, moving without urgency, and behaving much like any other traveler. Only when someone looked closely did the unsettling detail become apparent. Their features seemed absent, obscured, or strangely impossible to recognize. Historical records offer only scattered references to such encounters. Medieval chronicles occasionally mention mysterious strangers whose appearance inspired unusual fear, although descriptions vary considerably. Some accounts speak of hooded pilgrims whose faces remained hidden even in broad daylight. Others describe silent figures who avoided conversation before disappearing around a bend in the road, leaving no trace behind. Historians generally approach these reports with caution. Written descriptions are often brief, copied from earlier sources, or shaped by local storytelling traditions. Many survive only because later authors considered them curious enough to preserve, making it difficult to separate genuine observations from literary invention. Even so, the recurring themes are difficult to ignore. Roads have always occupied a unique place in human imagination. They connect communities while also leading into unfamiliar territory. Every traveler is, by definition, someone whose history may be unknown to those they encounter. Before reliable identification, photography, or written records became commonplace, strangers naturally attracted curiosity. A solitary individual whose appearance or behavior seemed unusual could quickly become the subject of rumor. Psychologists suggest that human perception may also contribute to these stories. Under poor lighting during periods of fatigue, or in emotionally charged situations, the brain sometimes struggles to process facial details accurately. Instead of forming a complete image, perception may briefly produce an unsettling impression of missing features. Such experiences are uncommon but well documented, particularly when visibility is limited by fog, darkness, or harsh backlighting. Environmental conditions along isolated roads can further influence perception. Dust carried by strong winds, heavy rain, deep shadows beneath wide-brimmed hats, or thick travel cloaks could conceal facial features surprisingly well. A brief encounter lasting only seconds might easily leave an observer uncertain about what they had actually seen. Yet, folklore rarely accepts simple explanations without adding another layer. Throughout Europe, Asia, and parts of the Middle East, legends describe mysterious wanderers who appear shortly before significant events. Sometimes they offer directions that later prove unexpectedly accurate. In other stories, they remain completely silent, continuing their journey without acknowledging anyone nearby. Their identity is never revealed, and attempts to follow them usually end in failure. Some traditions interpret these travelers as symbolic figures representing fate, mortality, or the uncertainty of life's journey. Others regard them as guardians of forgotten paths, appearing only when certain places or moments demand quiet observation rather than direct intervention. These interpretations reflect cultural beliefs rather than historical evidence, yet they demonstrate how consistently the image has appeared across generations. More speculative theories venture into less conventional territory. A few writers have suggested that the legends preserve distorted memories of travelers suffering from severe facial injuries or illnesses that were poorly understood in earlier centuries. Others imagine rare atmospheric or neurological phenomena affecting multiple witnesses under similar conditions. More imaginative proposals speak of beings existing briefly at the edge of ordinary perception, visible only under circumstances that remain unexplained. None of these ideas has been supported by verifiable evidence, but each attempts to account for stories that have proven remarkably persistent. Anthropologists note that faceless figures carry powerful symbolic meaning in many societies. Without recognizable features, a person becomes impossible to identify by age, ancestry, emotion, or intention. The absence of a face transforms an ordinary traveler into something profoundly unfamiliar, encouraging observers to fill the uncertainty with imagination. In that sense, the legend may reveal as much about human psychology as it does about folklore itself. Today, ancient roads still wind through mountains, forests, deserts, and open plains, many following routes established thousands of years ago. Archaeologists continue tracing these pathways, uncovering milestones, abandoned inns, and forgotten settlements that once welcomed passing travelers. Every discovery adds another piece to the historical record, yet the stories remain. Every so often, someone still claims to have encountered a solitary figure whose face could not quite be remembered, no matter how closely they tried to look. Whether these accounts arise from fleeting illusions, enduring folklore, or encounters that history has yet to explain remains uncertain. Perhaps the oldest roads still carry more than memories, preserving mysteries that continue walking beside us, unnoticed until the moment we decide to look a little closer. The first light of morning settles over quiet fields, rooftops, and winding country lanes. A blanket of fresh snow covers the landscape so completely that every new mark stands out with remarkable clarity. Fences, gardens, frozen streams, and stone walls appear untouched. Then someone notices a line of footprints stretching across the white surface. At first, they seem ordinary. A closer look reveals something far more unusual. Each impression resembles a cloven hoof, evenly spaced as though made by a creature walking upright with deliberate precision. The trail continues for mile after mile, crossing open fields, climbing over rooftops, passing through enclosed gardens, and even appearing on the far side of obstacles that would seem impossible for any ordinary animal to navigate. By the end of the day, an entire region is searching for an explanation. This is the enduring mystery known as the Devil's Footprints. The most famous account occurred in February 1855 in the English county of Devon. Following a night of heavy snowfall, residents from numerous villages reported discovering an extraordinary series of hoof-like impressions extending across the countryside. Contemporary newspapers described tracks appearing over an estimated distance of many miles, though the exact length remains debated because different reports offered different measurements. The event quickly became one of the most discussed mysteries of Victorian Britain. Witnesses claimed the prints crossed rivers, walls, haystacks, rooftops, and enclosed properties with little regard for natural barriers. Some residents reportedly became so alarmed that they hesitated to leave their homes, believing the marks belonged to something beyond ordinary understanding. Clergy, local officials, and curious observers all attempted to interpret what they had seen, yet no single explanation satisfied everyone. Historical documentation confirms that unusual tracks were indeed reported across Devon during that winter. Newspapers from the period preserved eyewitness accounts, correspondence, and speculation from both local residents and scientific observers. What remains uncertain is whether all the reported tracks formed one continuous trail, or whether multiple unrelated sets of prints became combined into a single dramatic narrative as news spread from village to village. Natural explanations have been proposed almost since the mystery first emerged. One suggestion involves small mammals such as rabbits, hares, or rodents. Under certain snow conditions, the pattern created by hopping animals can appear surprisingly similar to evenly spaced hoof marks, particularly after partial melting softens the surrounding edges. As temperatures fluctuate, originally distinct footprints may gradually merge into shapes that no longer resemble the animal that created them. Other researchers point toward birds. Some species move across snow in ways that become difficult to recognize after wind alters the surface. Foxes, badgers, and deer have also been suggested, although none fully account for every reported detail, especially the claims involving rooftops and enclosed spaces. Weather itself may have contributed to the mystery. Snow undergoes constant transformation as sunlight, freezing temperatures, and drifting wind reshape its surface. Small impressions can widen, deepen, or lose their original characteristics within only a few hours. A trail that initially appeared ordinary may later seem remarkably unusual by the time additional observers encounter it. Historians also note the influence of communication during the Victorian era. Newspapers competed eagerly for unusual stories, and sensational reports often spread rapidly between neighboring communities. As more people searched for mysterious footprints, unrelated animal tracks discovered elsewhere may have become linked to the original reports, creating the impression of one enormous continuous trail. Even with these practical possibilities, several aspects continue to invite discussion. Some eyewitnesses insisted the impressions maintained consistent spacing regardless of terrain. Others described tracks apparently ending without explanation or continuing across obstacles that seemed impossible for wildlife to cross. Because the original footprints disappeared as the snow melted, modern investigators must rely entirely upon written descriptions, sketches, and newspaper accounts, all of which vary in reliability and detail. More speculative interpretations naturally followed. Folklore connected the mysterious trail to supernatural visitors, while later writers imagined unknown animals, rare atmospheric events, or elaborate human hoaxes. A few fringe theories even propose that unusual environmental conditions temporarily altered the appearance of ordinary tracks in ways still not completely understood. None of these ideas has been supported by conclusive evidence, yet each reflects the enduring fascination inspired by a mystery that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. The devil's footprints occupy a unique place in historical folklore because they were witnessed not by a single individual but by many communities over a short period. Whether every report described the same phenomenon remains uncertain, but the collective memory proved powerful enough to preserve the event for more than a century and a half. Today, the snowy fields of Devon appear no different from countless other winter landscapes. The original tracks have long since disappeared, erased by thawing weather within days of their discovery. Yet every winter, when fresh snow settles over quiet countryside, the story returns. Somewhere beneath another untouched blanket of white, a new set of unexplained impressions may be waiting to challenge familiar assumptions once again. Whether the answer lies in misunderstood wildlife, unusual weather, forgotten details, or something that has yet to be fully recognized remains an open question, quietly preserved in one of history's most intriguing trails. Towering peaks rise above a maze of dense forests, glacial rivers, and narrow canyons carved over countless ages. Clouds drift slowly across the rugged mountains, casting long shadows over a landscape that feels almost untouched by modern civilization. The silence here is profound, interrupted only by rushing water, distant birds, and the occasional crack of shifting rock. It is a place of remarkable natural beauty, but also one surrounded by stories that have unsettled explorers for generations. Hidden within the northern reaches of Canada's Mackenzie Mountains lies a remote region commonly known as the Headless Valley. More formally associated with the South Nahanni River, this wilderness has fascinated adventurers, geologists, and historians for well over a century. Its dramatic terrain includes deep gorges, towering waterfalls, limestone caves, and vast stretches of country that remain difficult to access even today. Long before prospectors arrived, indigenous communities knew this region well. The Dene people preserved oral traditions describing parts of the Nahanni as places deserving caution and respect. Historians emphasize that these traditions reflected generations of intimate knowledge about an exceptionally demanding environment, where unpredictable weather, dangerous wildlife, and rugged geography could quickly overwhelm even experienced travelers. During the late 19th century, reports of gold discoveries drew prospectors into the valley. Like many remote mining regions, the promise of sudden wealth attracted individuals willing to face enormous risks. Some returned with stories of difficult journeys and disappointing searches. Others never returned at all. Among the most famous cases involves two brothers, Frank and Willie McLeod, who entered the Nahanni region in the early 1900s searching for gold. According to historical accounts, their remains were later discovered near their abandoned campsite. Over time, the story evolved into one of the valley's defining legends, with repeated claims that the brothers had been found without their heads. While historical details surrounding the discovery vary depending on the source, the account contributed significantly to the area's unsettling reputation. Additional disappearances and unexplained deaths reported over subsequent decades strengthened the legend. Prospectors, trappers, and isolated travelers occasionally vanished while exploring the immense wilderness. In certain instances, only abandoned camps or scattered equipment were recovered. In others, no trace was ever found. Researchers caution that these events occurred across many years rather than during a single period, and several details have almost certainly been altered through repeated retelling. Nevertheless, the combination of documented disappearances and dramatic folklore transformed the region into one of North America's most enduring wilderness mysteries. The landscape itself offers many practical explanations. The Nahanni region is extraordinarily rugged. Fast-moving rivers, hidden sinkholes, unstable cliffs, severe winters, and sudden weather changes create hazards capable of overwhelming even well-prepared expeditions. Dense forests and vast distances complicate search efforts, while animal activity and seasonal flooding may erase evidence long before rescue teams arrive. Modern search and rescue specialists note that remote wilderness can conceal accidents with surprising effectiveness. A single fall into a canyon, swift river, or concealed crevice may leave little visible indication of what occurred. Even today, locating someone in such terrain remains an enormous challenge despite satellite navigation and advanced communication equipment. Historians also point to the social realities of isolated mining camps. Competition over valuable claims occasionally led to conflict, while accidents, illness, and simple misfortune were common throughout frontier regions. Some disappearances that later inspired mystery may have resulted from circumstances that were never properly documented due to the remoteness of the area. Even so, not every question has been fully answered. Several reports describe camps appearing almost untouched despite the absence of their occupants. Others mention supplies left behind in ways that seemed inconsistent with voluntary departure. Because many original investigations were limited by the technology and transportation available at the time, some mysteries remain difficult to reconstruct with certainty. As often happens with places carrying dramatic reputations, more speculative ideas eventually emerged. Some writers suggested unknown predators or isolated groups living beyond recorded settlements. Others imagined hidden cave systems concealing evidence that has yet to be discovered. More imaginative theories speak of unusual geological phenomena, unexplained natural forces, or locations where travelers somehow lose their sense of direction despite considerable experience. None of these proposals has been supported by convincing evidence, yet they continue to circulate because the valley itself remains so vast and so little explored. Scientific expeditions conducted over recent decades have revealed extraordinary geological features throughout the Nahanni region, including extensive cave networks, fossil deposits, and unique ecosystems. Every expedition has expanded our understanding of this remarkable wilderness while also demonstrating how much of it remains difficult to study in detail. In many ways, the valley continues to resist easy interpretation, not because it defies science, but because its immense scale allows many questions to remain unanswered. Today, visitors come to admire the region's breathtaking scenery rather than search for hidden gold. The rivers continue their relentless course through ancient rock. Forests reclaim abandoned camps, and mountain winds erase the last traces of those who once passed through. Whether the Headless Valley's darkest legends arose from unfortunate coincidences, the unforgiving realities of wilderness exploration, or circumstances that history has yet to fully uncover, remains uncertain. Somewhere among those towering peaks and silent forests, the next piece of the story may still be waiting to emerge. Scattered across a windswept volcanic island, enormous stone figures gaze toward the interior with calm, unchanging expressions. Their features are remarkably distinct: broad foreheads, elongated noses, deep-set eyes, and powerful chins carefully carved from volcanic rock. Some stand upright upon carefully constructed stone platforms, while others remain partially buried, revealing only their heads above the surrounding earth. Together, they create one of the most recognizable archaeological landscapes anywhere in the world. These are the Moai of Rapa Nui, commonly known as Easter Island. More than 900 statues have been documented across the island, varying greatly in size and weight. Some measure only a few feet in height, while others rise over 30 feet and weigh many dozens of tons. Most were carved from compressed volcanic ash at the Rano Raraku quarry before somehow being transported across rugged terrain to ceremonial sites scattered throughout the island. The statues themselves are no mystery. Archaeologists have studied them for generations, learning a great deal about the culture that created them. What continues to inspire fascination is the question that followed the earliest European visitors. How were such immense monuments moved using the resources available centuries ago? When Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen reached the island in 1722, many of the statues were already standing on their platforms. European observers struggled to understand how a relatively isolated community could have transported stones of such extraordinary size without metal machinery, wheeled vehicles, or large draft animals. For many years, speculation filled the gaps left by limited evidence. Early theories proposed that enormous timber sledges carried the statues across the island. Others suggested elaborate systems of wooden rollers combined with ropes and coordinated teams of workers. While mechanically possible, these explanations raised additional questions. The island possessed limited forest resources, particularly during later periods of its history, prompting researchers to ask whether enough suitable timber had been available to support such large-scale transport. Another mystery involved the roads themselves. Archaeological surveys revealed carefully prepared pathways leading away from the quarry toward ceremonial platforms known as ahu. Along many of these routes stand unfinished statues, some apparently abandoned while still in transit. These silent monuments provide valuable clues, preserving snapshots of a process that was never fully completed. Among the most intriguing traditions preserved by the Rapa Nui people is the belief that the statues walked to their destinations through spiritual power known as mana. According to oral history, respected leaders or priests directed the movement of the moai using sacred authority rather than brute force. To outside observers, this explanation seemed symbolic rather than literal. Yet researchers eventually began asking an unexpected question. Could the statues have appeared to walk in a practical sense? During recent decades, experimental archaeology has offered compelling insights. Several research teams constructed life-sized replicas and tested different transportation methods using historically plausible materials. One widely discussed experiment demonstrated that an upright statue could indeed be moved by carefully coordinated teams pulling ropes attached to either side. By rocking the monument from left to right while guiding it forward, the statue advanced with a swaying motion remarkably similar to walking. The results surprised many observers. Not only did the technique require fewer people than some earlier theories suggested, but it also aligned closely with Rapa Nui oral traditions describing statues that walked to their ceremonial locations. While this experiment does not prove that every moai was transported exactly this way, it demonstrates that the concept is physically possible using relatively simple tools and careful coordination. Even with these advances, important questions remain. Some statues weigh considerably more than those used during experimental reconstructions. Others traveled much greater distances across uneven volcanic terrain. Researchers continue studying whether multiple transportation methods may have been employed depending on the statue's size, destination, and historical period. The island itself preserves additional mysteries. Hundreds of unfinished statues remain attached to the quarry walls, abandoned at various stages of carving. Some appear nearly complete, while others emerge only partially from the surrounding rock. Archaeologists believe production eventually slowed or ceased due to environmental, political, or social changes, but the precise sequence of events continues to be investigated. Geological studies have also revealed that many ceremonial platforms were deliberately positioned near important freshwater sources. This discovery suggests the statues may have served purposes extending beyond ancestor veneration alone, connecting religious belief with practical aspects of community life in ways researchers are only beginning to understand. As often happens with remarkable archaeological sites, more speculative ideas have also emerged. Some writers have proposed that the builders possessed engineering knowledge lost to later generations. Others imagine forgotten technologies capable of moving enormous stones with surprising efficiency. More imaginative theories invoke unknown energies or visitors from distant worlds. None of these proposals has been supported by credible archaeological evidence, and the overwhelming consensus among researchers attributes the statues entirely to the remarkable skill, organization, and determination of the Rapa Nui people themselves. Yet, the enduring image of walking statues continues to capture the imagination. Perhaps that fascination arises because the moai seem almost alive. Their carefully balanced forms, forward-leaning posture, and commanding presence create the impression of movement even while standing perfectly still. Across changing seasons and passing centuries, they continue watching the island much as they always have, silent witnesses to a history that remains only partially understood. Modern excavations continue to uncover new information beneath the soil surrounding the statues. Many figures once believed to consist only of heads have been revealed as complete bodies buried over time by natural sediment. Intricate carvings hidden below ground have transformed researchers' understanding of the monuments, reminding us that first impressions often conceal deeper realities. Every new discovery answers one question while introducing another. The quarry still holds unfinished giants waiting to reveal more about their creators. Ancient roads continue crossing the volcanic landscape, preserving subtle traces of journeys completed centuries ago. Whether the statues truly moved in the remarkable way suggested by oral tradition, whether multiple methods were used, or whether some details of their transportation remain undiscovered, the mystery has never entirely disappeared. The stone figures remain exactly where they have stood for generations, patiently guarding secrets that may still be waiting beneath the surface, ready to reshape our understanding of one of history's most extraordinary achievements. A broad sea of sand stretches beyond the horizon, its endless ridges reshaped each day by the steady force of the wind. As the sunlight shifts across the dunes, their smooth slopes seem almost fluid, changing color from pale gold to deep amber with every passing hour. At first, the landscape appears completely silent. Then, without warning, a deep vibration rolls through the air. It is not the sound of thunder, nor the distant echo of machinery. Instead, the dune itself seems to produce a low, resonant tone that lingers for several moments before fading back into silence. For centuries, this remarkable phenomenon has puzzled travelers, scientists, and local communities alike. Known today as the Singing Sand, or sometimes the Booming Dunes, it has been reported in deserts across the world, from North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula to Central Asia, China, and even isolated coastal dunes in North America. Despite being witnessed by countless observers, the experience remains striking enough that many first-time visitors struggle to believe the sound comes from nothing more than ordinary grains of sand. Historical references to these mysterious sounds extend deep into the past. Ancient travelers crossing great deserts occasionally described hearing distant music, low drums, or prolonged humming that seemed to emerge from the landscape itself. Some believed the sounds came from hidden settlements buried beneath the dunes. Others imagined spirits, forgotten armies, or supernatural guardians announcing their presence whenever the wind disturbed the desert surface. Medieval explorers preserved similar accounts in travel journals, often describing entire hillsides that appeared to sing during periods of strong wind or after sections of sand suddenly slid down steep slopes. Because these reports came from different regions separated by thousands of miles, they attracted considerable curiosity among later historians. For many centuries, however, no widely accepted explanation existed. The sounds themselves are surprisingly powerful. Under the right conditions, a moving dune can produce a sustained tone audible several miles away. Witnesses have compared the noise to a pipe organ, the vibration of a massive bell, the steady hum of an aircraft engine, or the deep note of a cello played somewhere beyond the horizon. In certain locations, the sound lasts only a few seconds. In others, it continues for nearly a minute before gradually fading. What could possibly cause an entire hillside of sand to behave like a musical instrument? Modern research has revealed that not all sand possesses this unusual ability. Only certain dunes containing grains of very specific size, shape, dryness, and mineral composition are capable of producing the characteristic sound. The grains themselves are typically smooth, rounded, and remarkably uniform, allowing them to move together in highly organized ways during an avalanche down the face of a dune. When thousands or even millions of these grains begin sliding simultaneously, they may synchronize their movement with surprising precision. Rather than producing random noise, the collective motion creates vibrations that resonate throughout the dune, amplifying into the deep tones heard by observers nearby. Although this explanation is supported by laboratory experiments and field studies, researchers continue investigating exactly how such perfect synchronization develops. The process appears more complicated than simple friction alone. Factors including humidity, grain coatings, temperature, and even the internal layering of the dune may influence whether the sound occurs at all. Some dunes that once sang regularly have fallen silent after periods of heavy rainfall. Others regain their voice only after prolonged dry conditions restore the delicate balance required for resonance. These observations suggest that even small environmental changes can dramatically affect the phenomenon. Geologists studying singing dunes often describe them as natural acoustic systems. The shape of the dune, the depth of the moving sand layer, and the arrangement of individual grains all contribute to the final sound. In many respects, the entire landscape functions as a giant resonating chamber, converting countless tiny collisions into a single, powerful note. Yet, despite these advances, several questions remain unresolved. Different singing dunes produce noticeably different frequencies, even when their sand appears nearly identical. Some generate low booming tones, while others emit higher humming sounds. Researchers continue exploring why neighboring dunes exposed to similar weather sometimes behave very differently. The precise combination of conditions required remains an active area of scientific investigation. Long before modern geology offered possible explanations, local traditions developed their own interpretations. In various cultures, the sounds were associated with hidden kingdoms buried beneath the desert, protective spirits watching over sacred places, or ancient voices preserved within the shifting landscape. Such stories reflected the profound impression left upon anyone fortunate enough to witness the phenomenon firsthand. More speculative ideas continue to circulate as well. Some writers have suggested unknown geological processes occurring deep beneath the dunes, while others imagine subtle interactions between underground cavities and surface vibrations. A few fringe theories even propose that certain deserts preserve acoustic properties unlike any yet fully understood. None of these proposals has been confirmed through scientific evidence, but they illustrate how naturally the phenomenon inspires curiosity whenever conventional explanations seem incomplete. The mystery becomes even more remarkable when viewed from another perspective. Sand is among the most common materials on Earth. It forms beaches, riverbanks, deserts, and coastlines across nearly every continent. Yet, only a small number of dunes possess the precise characteristics needed to produce these haunting sounds. The difference between ordinary silence and a landscape capable of singing may depend upon subtle variations almost invisible to the human eye. Today, scientists continue visiting these remote locations with sensitive microphones, vibration sensors, and satellite equipment, hoping to better understand the delicate mechanics responsible for the phenomenon. Every expedition adds another piece to the puzzle, while reminding researchers that nature often accomplishes extraordinary things through remarkably simple materials. As evening settles over the dunes, the wind begins to rise once again. Grains of sand slowly gather momentum along the steep slopes, and somewhere beyond the next ridge, another deep note drifts across the open desert. Whether every aspect of the singing sand can eventually be explained through physics alone, or whether the landscape still holds acoustic secrets waiting to be uncovered, remains uncertain. For now, the desert continues its quiet performance, offering a reminder that some of the world's most memorable mysteries are not seen at all, but heard. Hidden beneath layers of weathered stone, an ancient burial chamber rests in near total darkness. Narrow corridors lead toward a carefully sealed tomb where carved walls still preserve the craftsmanship of another age. The air is cool and remarkably still. Moisture gathers slowly along the rough surface of the rock, reflecting the faint glow of a lantern. Then, under particular conditions, visitors notice something unexpected. Thin streaks of dark red liquid begin to emerge from tiny cracks in the stone, slowly tracing their way across the surface. To generations of observers, it has appeared as though the tomb itself is bleeding. Stories of so-called bleeding tombs appear in numerous parts of the ancient world. Some are connected with royal burials, others with revered religious figures or forgotten rulers whose resting places gradually became surrounded by local tradition. Although the locations differ, the descriptions often share striking similarities. Witnesses describe crimson-colored moisture appearing unexpectedly on stone walls, sarcophagi, or carved monuments, particularly during certain seasons or changes in weather. The image is powerful enough that many of these sites became associated with supernatural explanations long before scientific investigation was possible. Historical records show that unusual stains on stone have attracted attention for centuries. Ancient writers occasionally described sacred monuments that seemed to produce water or colored liquids without visible sources. Medieval pilgrims visiting old burial sites sometimes recorded similar observations, interpreting the phenomenon according to the religious beliefs of their own communities. In many cases, the reports were preserved not as scientific observations, but as signs carrying symbolic or spiritual meaning. As archaeology developed into a formal discipline, researchers began approaching these stories from a different perspective. Stone, despite its appearance, is rarely as solid as it seems. Most natural rock contains networks of microscopic pores and fractures capable of transporting moisture over surprisingly long distances. Rainwater, groundwater, and minerals dissolved within them may slowly migrate through these channels before emerging at exposed surfaces. Under favorable conditions, this process can create persistent damp patches or narrow trickles that appear without any immediately obvious source. The color presents another intriguing piece of the puzzle. Iron-rich minerals occur naturally in many types of rock. When groundwater passes through these deposits, dissolved iron may oxidize after reaching the surface, producing reddish stains remarkably similar in appearance to dried blood. Depending upon the surrounding geology, the color can range from pale orange to deep crimson. To someone unfamiliar with the underlying chemistry, the resemblance can be startling. Biology may also contribute. Certain microscopic algae, bacteria, and fungi produce vivid red pigments as part of their natural life cycles. These organisms often thrive in cool, damp environments such as caves, underground chambers, and ancient masonry. Under changing humidity or seasonal conditions, colonies may suddenly become more visible, giving the impression that fresh crimson liquid has appeared where none existed before. Even with these well-established processes, not every account is easily explained. Some reports describe red staining appearing only during specific anniversaries, periods of heavy rainfall, or unusual weather conditions. Others claim that the phenomenon disappears entirely for years before returning unexpectedly. Because many of these observations were recorded before modern scientific monitoring became available, separating measurable events from embellished storytelling is often impossible. Archaeologists have encountered similar challenges at several ancient sites where natural mineral deposits create dramatic visual effects. In many cases, careful laboratory analysis has revealed ordinary geological or biological causes. Yet local traditions surrounding the locations often continue unchanged, not because evidence has been ignored, but because cultural memory sometimes values symbolic meaning as much as physical explanation. Throughout history, burial places have occupied a unique position between history and belief. They preserve the remains of real individuals while also becoming places where memory, ritual, and storytelling intersect. A natural process occurring within such a setting may therefore acquire significance far beyond its physical origin. More speculative ideas naturally followed. Some writers have suggested that ancient builders intentionally selected stone containing unusual mineral properties to create dramatic effects during certain seasons. Others imagine hidden hydraulic systems concealed within burial complexes, designed to impress visitors or reinforce religious authority. A handful of fringe theories even propose chemical knowledge now lost to history, allowing ancient architects to produce controlled staining within ceremonial chambers. Although these possibilities remain unverified, they reflect the remarkable sophistication demonstrated by many ancient civilizations in architecture, engineering, and water management. Researchers emphasize that no convincing evidence currently supports supernatural explanations for bleeding tombs. At the same time, they acknowledge that each archaeological site presents its own geological conditions, requiring careful study rather than broad assumptions. What appears mysterious at first glance often reveals a fascinating interaction between natural processes and human craftsmanship. Modern analytical techniques, including mineral spectroscopy, microbial sampling, moisture mapping, and high-resolution imaging, continue providing new insights into ancient monuments once considered impossible to understand. Every investigation helps distinguish folklore from measurable evidence, while also uncovering details about construction methods, environmental change, and long-term preservation. Yet the emotional impact of the phenomenon remains difficult to dismiss. Standing within a chamber that has remained sealed for centuries, watching crimson streaks slowly emerge from weathered stone, it is easy to understand why earlier generations interpreted the scene through the language of legend rather than geology. The experience itself possesses a quiet power that no laboratory analysis can entirely replace. Today, many of these ancient tombs remain carefully protected, visited by archaeologists, historians, and curious travelers alike. Instruments may measure humidity, identify minerals, and document microscopic organisms with remarkable precision. Even so, there are moments when the evidence leaves room for reflection rather than certainty. Whether every report of a bleeding tomb can ultimately be explained through natural chemistry, whether some ancient builders deliberately enhanced these effects, or whether a few details of the old stories still preserve observations that have yet to be fully understood, remains uncertain. In the cool silence of those forgotten chambers, the stone continues to keep its own quiet counsel, revealing only as much as time allows. Twilight settles slowly over an empty country lane as the final light slips behind distant hills. Ancient trees lean over the narrow path, their branches forming dark arches that sway gently with the evening breeze. Somewhere beyond the tree line, an owl calls into the growing darkness. Then, at the edge of the road, a large shape appears almost without warning. It stands perfectly still for a moment before stepping forward with calm, deliberate movements. Its coat is as dark as the surrounding night, and its eyes seem to catch the faintest traces of light. Just as quietly as it arrived, it disappears into the shadows once again. For generations, this mysterious figure has been known simply as the Black Dog. Unlike many legendary creatures confined to a single region, stories of enormous black dogs appear throughout Britain, Europe, and parts of North America. Although each tradition gives the animal a different name and personality, the central image remains remarkably consistent. Witnesses describe an unusually large dog with dark fur, silent movements, and an unsettling presence. Some accounts portray the animal as a guardian, while others regard it as a warning of approaching tragedy or profound change. The earliest written references emerged during the medieval period, although many folklorists believe the tradition is considerably older. Rural communities passed these stories from one generation to the next, preserving remarkably similar descriptions despite being separated by considerable distances. In England alone, regional names such as Black Shuck, Barghest, Padfoot, and Girt Dog became woven into local folklore, each carrying its own variations while sharing familiar characteristics. Perhaps the most famous account dates to 1577, when violent storms swept across parts of eastern England. Contemporary reports describe an enormous black dog said to have entered a parish church during the height of the storm. According to the surviving accounts, panic spread among those gathered inside as the mysterious animal moved through the building before disappearing as suddenly as it had arrived. Historians note that the event survives primarily through local records and later retellings, making it difficult to separate eyewitness testimony from folklore shaped by decades of repetition. Similar reports appear in many other locations. Travelers occasionally claimed to encounter a silent black dog while walking isolated roads after sunset. In numerous accounts, the animal simply accompanied the traveler for part of the journey before vanishing without explanation. Other stories describe the figure standing motionless beside crossroads, old bridges, cemeteries, or abandoned ruins, watching quietly before fading into darkness. Interestingly, not every tradition presents the black dog as a threatening presence. In parts of northern England and Scotland, certain legends describe mysterious black dogs guiding lost travelers away from dangerous cliffs or safely through heavy fog. Rather than serving as an omen of disaster, these versions portray the animal as a silent protector whose appearance offers reassurance instead of fear. Such contrasting interpretations suggest that the legend evolved differently within individual communities while preserving the same striking image. Historians generally view the black dog as part of a much older tradition connecting animals with symbolic meaning. Throughout history, dogs have served as guardians, companions, hunters, and protectors. Many ancient cultures associated them with boundaries between life and death, known and unknown, safety and uncertainty. The black dog may therefore represent a continuation of symbolic ideas that gradually blended with regional folklore over many centuries. Psychologists offer another perspective. Human perception changes significantly under low-light conditions. At dusk or during fog, familiar objects may briefly appear unfamiliar as the brain attempts to interpret incomplete visual information. Large domestic dogs, livestock, or even shadows cast by vegetation can occasionally produce surprisingly convincing illusions, particularly when observers already expect unusual encounters along isolated roads. Memory itself may also influence these reports. Encounters remembered during emotionally significant moments often become more vivid over time, while ordinary details gradually fade. A brief glimpse of an unidentified animal may later acquire greater symbolic meaning after unrelated events occur, encouraging people to connect coincidence with memory in ways that feel deeply personal. Even with these practical explanations, several aspects continue to attract attention. The remarkable consistency of descriptions collected from different regions remains difficult to ignore. Witnesses separated by geography, language, and historical period often describe similar size, behavior, and appearance, despite having no apparent connection with one another. Folklorists generally attribute this pattern to the spread and adaptation of enduring oral traditions, although the consistency itself continues to fascinate researchers studying cultural memory. More speculative interpretations naturally developed alongside the historical accounts. Some writers have proposed that the black dog represents a psychological archetype appearing during periods of stress or uncertainty. Others suggest rare atmospheric conditions might briefly distort perception, creating experiences interpreted according to local folklore. More imaginative theories speak of guardian spirits, supernatural messengers, or unexplained entities associated with ancient pathways and forgotten places. None of these proposals has been supported by verifiable scientific evidence, yet each reflects humanity's long-standing effort to understand encounters that feel profoundly unusual. One detail appears repeatedly throughout the legend. The black dog seldom attacks or even approaches those who report seeing it. Instead, it watches quietly, crosses the traveler's path, or simply disappears into the surrounding landscape. This restraint distinguishes the figure from many other creatures found in folklore. Its greatest power lies not in action, but in presence. Today, countless old roads, woodland trails, and windswept coastlines associated with these stories remain open to visitors. Most who walk them encounter nothing beyond ordinary wildlife and changing weather. Yet every so often, another account emerges from someone convinced they briefly shared the path with an unusually large silent dog that vanished without leaving footprints behind. Whether these experiences arise from folklore shaping perception, misunderstood encounters with ordinary animals, or something that has yet to be fully explained, remains uncertain. As darkness settles over the oldest roads, the legend of the Black Dog continues its quiet journey, inviting each new generation to wonder what might still be waiting just beyond the edge of the light. Towering pines and ancient oaks form a dense canopy overhead, allowing only scattered beams of sunlight to reach the forest floor. Moss blankets fallen logs, while winding paths disappear behind curtains of ferns and tangled branches. The air is cool, rich with the scent of damp earth and weathered bark. At first, the woodland seems perfectly still. Then, a faint murmur drifts through the leaves. It is too soft to identify, too rhythmic to dismiss entirely as ordinary wind. For just a moment, it almost resembles distant voices engaged in quiet conversation. Stories like these have given rise to one of the oldest and most widespread legends in human history, the mystery of the Whispering Forest. Unlike many mysteries tied to a single location, whispering forests appear in traditions from every inhabited continent. Dense woodlands have long occupied a unique place in folklore, representing both refuge and uncertainty. They offered food, shelter, and valuable resources, yet also concealed predators, unfamiliar terrain, and dangers that could not always be seen. It is perhaps no surprise that generations of travelers came to believe forests held secrets that revealed themselves only under particular conditions. Historical writings contain numerous references to mysterious sounds emerging from woodland landscapes. Greek and Roman authors occasionally described sacred groves where unusual voices were believed to accompany religious ceremonies. Medieval chronicles mention travelers hearing conversations despite finding no one nearby. Similar traditions appear throughout Asia, North America, and Northern Europe, where local communities preserved stories of forests that seemed capable of speaking to those willing, or unfortunate enough, to listen. The descriptions vary remarkably little. Most witnesses do not report loud or dramatic sounds. Instead, they describe soft murmurs hovering at the edge of comprehension. Some compare the experience to distant conversations carried by the wind. Others insist they briefly recognize their own names being spoken before the sound dissolved into rustling leaves. A few claim the whispers seemed to move through the forest, remaining just beyond sight no matter which direction they followed. Historians generally interpret these accounts within the broader context of oral tradition. Forests naturally encourage storytelling because they limit visibility while amplifying unfamiliar sounds. Before artificial lighting and modern navigation, becoming disoriented among dense trees presented a genuine risk. Legends warning against wandering too deeply into the woods often served practical purposes, encouraging caution while preserving cultural values through memorable narratives. Modern science offers several fascinating possibilities. Forests possess remarkably complex acoustic properties. Layers of vegetation reflect, absorb, and redirect sound in unpredictable ways. Wind passing through different species of trees creates distinct tones depending upon leaf shape, branch structure, and moisture levels. A sound originating hundreds of yards away may appear unexpectedly close, while nearby noises sometimes seem strangely distant. Temperature changes further complicate matters. During calm evenings, layers of cool and warm air may bend sound waves, allowing conversations, flowing water, or animal calls to travel surprising distances. Under the right atmospheric conditions, ordinary sounds can become distorted enough to resemble faint human speech. Researchers studying psychoacoustics, the science of how people perceive sound, have identified another important factor. The human brain constantly searches for recognizable patterns within incomplete information. This tendency, known as auditory pareidolia, explains why random sounds occasionally seem to contain words, music, or familiar voices. Just as clouds sometimes resemble faces, natural background noise may briefly appear to form understandable speech. Such experiences are far more common than many people realize. Wildlife contributes its own layer of complexity. Certain birds produce calls strikingly similar to whistles or fragments of speech. Foxes, owls, and several nocturnal mammals generate vocalizations capable of surprising even experienced naturalists. When these sounds blend with moving wind and echo through dense vegetation, the resulting effect can become remarkably convincing. Yet, despite these well-established explanations, some reports continue to intrigue researchers. Several historical accounts describe groups of people hearing the same whispered phrases simultaneously. Others mention sounds recorded in isolated forests that remain difficult to identify with certainty, even after careful acoustic analysis. Most of these recordings ultimately receive ordinary explanations involving wildlife or environmental noise, but a small number continue to resist immediate classification due to poor recording quality or incomplete environmental data. Local traditions often provide interpretations quite different from scientific models. In many cultures, forests are viewed as places where memory lingers. Ancient trees witnessing countless generations naturally became associated with ancestral presence, spiritual guardians, or unseen inhabitants existing alongside the visible world. These beliefs rarely describe the whispers as openly threatening. More often, they portray them as reminders that the forest contains histories extending far beyond any individual lifetime. Some indigenous traditions also emphasize that forests communicate in ways requiring careful observation rather than supernatural interpretation. The movement of branches, changes in bird activity, subtle shifts in wind, and distant animal calls all convey valuable information to those familiar with the landscape. To someone lacking that experience, these layered natural signals may seem mysterious when they are actually expressions of a healthy and active ecosystem. More speculative theories continue to circulate as well. Some writers have proposed that dense forests possess unusual acoustic characteristics not yet fully understood. Others imagine subtle interactions between geology, vegetation, and atmospheric conditions capable of producing exceptionally realistic sound illusions. More imaginative interpretations suggest that whispered voices represent echoes of past events somehow preserved within the landscape itself. None of these ideas has been supported by conclusive scientific evidence, yet they persist because forests remain among the least predictable natural environments people regularly encounter. Modern researchers continue studying woodland acoustics using sensitive recording equipment, environmental monitoring stations, and three-dimensional sound mapping. Each investigation reveals new layers of complexity, demonstrating that forests shape sound in remarkably intricate ways. Even ordinary breezes can produce effects far richer than casual listeners might expect. As evening settles beneath the canopy, the woodland gradually transforms once again. Birds grow quiet, shadows lengthen between the trunks, and every distant sound seems slightly more difficult to identify. Somewhere deeper among the trees, another faint murmur drifts across the leaves before dissolving into the surrounding silence. Whether every whispered voice can ultimately be traced to natural acoustics, whether forgotten traditions preserve observations science has only begun to understand, or whether the oldest forests still guard mysteries beyond our present knowledge remains uncertain. For now, they continue speaking in their own quiet language, inviting only the most patient listeners to hear what the wind chooses to carry. Nestled among weathered stone ruins, the circular opening appears almost unremarkable at first glance. Its rim has been worn smooth by centuries of wind, rain, and countless curious visitors who have cautiously leaned over the edge, hoping to catch a glimpse of what lies below. Sunlight reaches only a short distance into the darkness before being swallowed entirely. A pebble released from the rim disappears almost immediately, followed by several long seconds of silence before a faint, distant sound finally rises from the depths. Even then, it is difficult to judge how far the stone actually traveled. In places like this, the imagination begins to work long before certainty ever arrives. Throughout history, stories of bottomless wells have appeared in nearly every corner of the world. Ancient settlements, medieval castles, isolated monasteries, forgotten villages, and remote mountain sanctuaries have all claimed to possess wells whose true depths could never be measured. Some were believed to connect with hidden underground rivers. Others were said to descend into immense caverns beneath the earth. A few legends suggested they reached places that no ordinary traveler was ever meant to see. The remarkable consistency of these stories has fascinated historians for generations. Long before modern drilling equipment or geological surveying existed, wells represented one of humanity's few direct connections with the hidden world beneath the surface. Digging even a modest well required tremendous effort, often revealing unfamiliar layers of rock, underground water, and natural cavities that seemed mysterious to those who encountered them. It is hardly surprising that such places gradually became associated with legends extending far beyond their practical purpose. Ancient civilizations frequently attached symbolic meaning to deep wells and natural springs. In many cultures, they were regarded as sacred places where the visible world intersected with unseen realms. Offerings, coins, carved objects, and ceremonial artifacts have been recovered from wells across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, demonstrating that these locations often served religious as well as practical functions. Archaeologists have documented countless examples where wells became focal points for ritual activity, lasting hundreds of years. Yet, alongside these historical facts grew another tradition. Travelers occasionally described wells into which stones seemed to fall endlessly before producing any audible echo. Others reported unusual drafts of cold air emerging from deep shafts even during the hottest days of summer. Some insisted they heard faint sounds rising from below that resembled distant water, soft voices, or unexplained vibrations. Whether these experiences reflected unusual geology or imaginative storytelling remains difficult to determine, but together they shaped one of history's most enduring underground mysteries. From a scientific perspective, the idea of a truly bottomless well is impossible. Every natural shaft, sinkhole, or man-made excavation must eventually terminate, whether in solid rock, underground water, or collapsed sediment. Even the deepest caves explored by modern speleologists possess measurable limits, though reaching them often requires years of careful investigation. The real mystery lies in why so many wells appeared impossible to measure using the tools available at the time. Acoustics provide one possible explanation. Sound behaves unpredictably within deep vertical shafts. Echoes may reflect from irregular rock surfaces, become absorbed by moisture, or scatter through interconnected side passages before returning to the listener. A falling stone may strike several ledges on its descent, creating delayed or confusing sounds that make estimating depth extraordinarily difficult. Underground geology introduces additional complexity. Many regions contain extensive cave systems, limestone chambers, lava tubes, and fractured rock formations extending far beneath the surface. A well intersecting one of these natural voids may suddenly widen into an immense cavern, invisible from above. In such cases, the sound of falling objects may travel through multiple chambers before returning, producing the illusion of far greater depth than actually exists. Hydrology plays an equally important role. Underground rivers frequently carve intricate networks beneath landscapes over thousands of years. Water, moving through concealed channels, generates low-frequency sounds capable of traveling long distances through rock. Someone standing above an ancient well might hear these faint echoes without recognizing their true origin, naturally encouraging speculation about hidden spaces far below. Modern exploration has repeatedly demonstrated how deceptive subterranean environments can be. Speleologists continue discovering previously unknown cave networks extending for hundreds of miles beneath familiar landscapes. Some systems contain vast chambers large enough to accommodate entire buildings, while others include vertical shafts descending hundreds of feet before opening into underground rivers. These discoveries remind researchers that much of the world beneath our feet remains only partially explored. Even with advanced technology, certain deep shafts continue presenting unusual challenges. Remote-operated cameras, laser mapping equipment, sonar instruments, and three-dimensional geological surveys have greatly improved our understanding of underground environments. Yet, unstable rock, submerged passages, and narrow constrictions often prevent complete exploration. In some locations, investigators have mapped impressive depths while still leaving significant portions inaccessible due to safety concerns. History also offers examples where legends eventually contained unexpected elements of truth. Wells, once dismissed as ordinary, later proved to connect with forgotten tunnels, concealed chambers, or extensive cave systems unknown to previous generations. Such discoveries do not confirm stories of bottomless depths, but they demonstrate how easily important underground features can remain hidden for centuries. As with many enduring mysteries, more speculative ideas eventually emerged. Some traditions claimed that certain wells served as entrances to underground cities or ancient sanctuaries deliberately concealed beneath the earth. Others imagined natural passages leading toward immense caverns extending beyond mapped geology. Medieval folklore occasionally described wells functioning as boundaries between different realms, places where unusual sounds and unexplained echoes reflected something more than ordinary acoustics. In later centuries, fringe writers proposed forgotten engineering techniques, concealed excavation projects, or geological structures unlike any yet documented. None of these proposals has been supported by reliable scientific evidence, but they continue to circulate because the underground world remains among the least visible parts of our planet. Perhaps the greatest fascination inspired by bottomless wells comes from what they represent rather than what they contain. Human beings naturally seek to measure, map, and understand the unknown. A shaft descending into darkness without revealing its destination challenges that instinct in a uniquely powerful way. Even after modern science explains much of the surrounding geology, the experience of standing beside such an opening remains deeply compelling. Today, many historic wells have been carefully studied, preserved, or sealed for public safety, while others continue serving the communities that first constructed them centuries ago. Beneath their stone walls, groundwater still moves through ancient rock exactly as it always has, quietly shaping hidden passages beyond ordinary view. Each new geological survey reveals another fragment of the underground landscape, while reminding researchers how much remains concealed beneath familiar ground. Whether every legendary bottomless well can eventually be traced to natural formations, whether some still connect to unexplored cave systems, or whether forgotten builders understood more about the hidden world below than history currently recognizes remains uncertain. Somewhere beneath the surface, beyond the reach of sunlight, the earth continues to guard its deepest passages, waiting patiently for those willing to follow the darkness a little farther. The entrance is little more than a narrow opening in a weathered hillside, almost hidden behind tangled vegetation and fractured rock. Cool air drifts steadily from the passage, carrying the unmistakable scent of damp limestone and mineral-rich water. A few cautious steps inside are enough to silence the outside world. The sounds of birds, wind, and distant streams fade behind solid stone, replaced by a slow rhythm of dripping water that echoes through unseen chambers. Then, somewhere deeper within the cave, another sound begins to emerge. It rises softly, falls away, and returns again with remarkable regularity. To many who hear it for the first time, it resembles someone quietly weeping in the darkness. Legends of the Crying Cave appear in many parts of the world. Although the names and locations vary, the central mystery remains strikingly similar. Travelers describe caverns where unexplained sounds resemble human sobbing, sighing, or mournful voices, often without any visible source. Some accounts date back hundreds of years, while others continue to be reported by modern visitors exploring remote cave systems. Unlike many legends centered entirely on folklore, these stories often begin with a genuine natural phenomenon. Caves are among the most acoustically complex environments found in nature. Their twisting tunnels, towering chambers, underground rivers, and narrow fissures transform ordinary sounds into something remarkably unfamiliar. A single drop of water striking stone may echo through multiple passages before returning as a prolonged series of tones. Air moving through constricted openings creates whistles, low vibrations, and sustained notes capable of changing with temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure. Yet even after understanding these principles, many cave visitors describe sounds that seem unexpectedly emotional. Historical references to mysterious caves extend into antiquity. Greek and Roman writers occasionally mentioned sacred caverns believed to contain voices emerging from the earth itself. Throughout Europe, local traditions associated certain caves with spirits, forgotten rulers, or individuals whose grief was said to linger long after death. Similar beliefs appear in Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas, where caves frequently occupied important ceremonial and spiritual roles. Archaeological discoveries help explain why these locations became so culturally significant. Numerous cave systems contain evidence of ancient habitation, ritual activity, artwork, and carefully placed offerings. Some preserved paintings dating back tens of thousands of years. Others served as burial sites or places of religious ceremony over many generations. These findings demonstrate that people have regarded caves as extraordinary places since the earliest chapters of human history. The unusual sounds heard within them naturally became part of that tradition. Scientists studying cave acoustics have identified several mechanisms capable of producing surprisingly voice-like effects. Water flowing through narrow passages generates fluctuating frequencies that sometimes resemble distant breathing or whispered speech. Air currents passing through irregular openings behave much like wind moving across the mouth of a musical instrument, producing sustained tones that shift subtly as environmental conditions change. The structure of the cave itself plays an equally important role. Large chambers act as natural resonance chambers, amplifying particular frequencies while reducing others. Multiple echoes returning at slightly different times may blend into patterns the human brain interprets as familiar vocal sounds. This process becomes especially convincing in near-total darkness, where reduced visual information encourages greater reliance upon hearing. Psychologists refer to this tendency as auditory pareidolia, the natural inclination to recognize meaningful patterns within ambiguous sound. It is the same cognitive process that allows people to hear words within random noise or imagine melodies emerging from mechanical rhythms. Deep underground, where every sound behaves differently than expected, the effect can become surprisingly persuasive. Modern cave researchers frequently record sounds that initially appear mysterious, but later prove traceable to entirely ordinary sources. Water dripping onto hollow rock formations, distant waterfalls hidden behind stone walls, colonies of bats, shifting air pressure, and even subtle movements within the surrounding geology all contribute to an acoustic environment unlike anything experienced above ground. Still, several reports continue to invite careful examination. Certain caves produce highly localized sounds heard only from specific positions within the passage. Move a few feet in either direction, and the apparent voices disappear completely. In other locations, seasonal weather changes dramatically alter the cave's acoustics, causing sounds to emerge only during particular months of the year. These variations remain subjects of ongoing geological and acoustic research. Speleologists, scientists who study caves, have repeatedly emphasized that subterranean environments remain among Earth's least understood natural systems. Thousands of cave networks have yet to be completely mapped, while many known passages remain inaccessible because of flooding, unstable rock, or extremely narrow openings. Every year, new chambers and underground rivers are discovered in regions thought to have been thoroughly explored. Local traditions often preserve explanations very different from those offered by science. Many communities believe the crying sounds belong to ancient guardians protecting sacred places. Others associate them with forgotten tragedies, lost travelers, or communities displaced long ago. These stories rarely describe the voices as threatening. Instead, they portray the cave as remembering events that have faded everywhere else, preserving echoes that time has not entirely erased. Anthropologists suggest these legends may reflect humanity's instinctive response to unfamiliar environments. Caves remove ordinary visual reference points, distort sound, and alter a person's sense of space and direction. Such conditions naturally encourage symbolic interpretation, particularly among societies that regarded underground spaces as places connecting different aspects of existence. More speculative theories have emerged over the years as well. Some writers have proposed that unusual mineral formations generate acoustic effects not yet fully understood. Others imagine hidden chambers acting as natural resonators capable of preserving complex sound patterns under exceptional circumstances. More imaginative proposals speak of geological processes interacting with underground water in ways still awaiting scientific explanation. While none of these ideas has been confirmed through reliable evidence, they continue to attract attention because cave acoustics remain remarkably complex even after decades of research. Advances in three-dimensional mapping, laser scanning, environmental monitoring, and digital sound analysis have greatly expanded our understanding of subterranean landscapes. Researchers now reconstruct entire cave systems with extraordinary precision, revealing hidden chambers, airflow patterns, and underground waterways that earlier generations could scarcely imagine. Even so, each new survey often uncovers additional questions alongside its discoveries. Perhaps that is what makes the Crying Cave such an enduring mystery. It exists at the intersection of geology, psychology, history, and folklore, where measurable natural processes produce experiences that feel deeply personal to those who encounter them. A sound created entirely by water and stone may still awaken emotions impossible to measure with scientific instruments. Today, visitors entering these ancient caverns carry sophisticated recording equipment, environmental sensors, and detailed maps. Yet, when the lights dim and distant echoes begin drifting through the darkness, many still pause to listen. Whether every mournful sound can ultimately be explained through acoustics alone, whether ancient traditions preserve observations that science is only beginning to understand, or whether the Earth still holds underground secrets beyond our present knowledge, remains uncertain. Far below the surface, where darkness has endured for countless ages, the quiet voices of the Crying Cave continue to echo through the stone, inviting anyone who hears them to wonder what else may still be waiting in the silence. At the edge of an old trade route, where worn stone roads disappear into rolling hills and dense woodland, The remains of a small marketplace lie scattered beneath centuries of dust. Broken pottery rests beside weathered foundations. Rusted scales, fragments of coins, and pieces of decorated glass hint that merchants once gathered here from distant lands. During daylight, the location appears no different from countless forgotten archaeological sites. But according to stories passed down for generations, this place was once far more than an ordinary market. It was said to be a marketplace that appeared when conditions were just right, filled with unfamiliar traders who arrived without warning and departed before sunrise, leaving behind almost no trace of their visit. Legends such as these have become known by many names, but one description appears again and again throughout history: the Shadow Marketplace. Unlike stories centered on a single location, accounts of mysterious temporary markets appear across Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, and parts of East Asia. The details differ from region to region, yet the central idea remains remarkably consistent. Travelers claim to discover thriving markets where none had existed before. Exotic goods filled the stalls. Merchants spoke unfamiliar languages. Rare spices, unusual metals, beautifully crafted jewelry, and objects unlike anything found in nearby towns were displayed for sale. Then, when witnesses returned the following day, everything had disappeared. At first glance, such stories seem firmly rooted in folklore. Yet, historians point out that ancient trade networks were often far more dynamic than modern maps suggest. Caravan routes shifted with the seasons, political alliances, weather conditions, and access to water. Temporary markets frequently emerged wherever merchants from multiple regions happened to meet. Some existed only for a few days before entire trading communities packed their goods and continued their journeys. In many cases, these seasonal gatherings left surprisingly little archaeological evidence. Historical records describe enormous trade fairs operating for limited periods before vanishing completely until the following year. In regions where merchants traveled continuously, markets often consisted of tents, wooden stalls, and portable shelters rather than permanent buildings. Once dismantled, only scattered artifacts remained, gradually becoming buried beneath soil and vegetation. This historical reality may explain how stories of disappearing marketplaces first developed. Ancient trade itself possessed an almost mysterious quality. A merchant arriving from thousands of miles away carried unfamiliar clothing, foreign languages, unusual foods, and technologies unknown to local communities. To people living in isolated settlements, such encounters could seem almost unbelievable. Rare objects appeared suddenly, changed hands, and continued toward distant destinations never seen by those who purchased them. Over time, memory and storytelling naturally expanded upon these remarkable events. Several medieval travel accounts describe wandering merchants encountering prosperous settlements that could not later be located. While historians generally attribute these reports to navigation errors, changing landscapes, or misunderstandings involving temporary caravan camps, the stories gradually evolved into legends describing marketplaces existing outside ordinary geography. Deserts offered particularly fertile ground for such traditions. Mirages created by layers of heated air can produce convincing illusions of distant settlements shimmering on the horizon. Entire groups of travelers have historically mistaken these optical effects for villages or caravan stations before discovering only empty landscape upon arrival. Combined with exhaustion, dehydration, and unfamiliar terrain, such experiences undoubtedly contributed to tales of elusive destinations that seemed to disappear as quickly as they appeared. Mountain regions presented different challenges. Heavy fog, rapidly changing weather, and winding valleys often concealed settlements until travelers stood almost upon them. A village, hidden by mist one evening, might seem impossible to relocate after weather conditions changed the following morning. Oral traditions transformed these practical experiences into enduring stories of hidden communities appearing only to fortunate or unfortunate visitors. Archaeology has uncovered evidence supporting parts of these historical patterns. Excavations along ancient trade routes have revealed forgotten stopping points that once supported vibrant commercial activity before being abandoned entirely. Some remained unknown for centuries until erosion, construction projects, or systematic surveys brought them back to light. Coins originating from distant empires, imported ceramics, glassware, textiles, and luxury goods demonstrate just how interconnected ancient trade truly was. These discoveries remind us that history often leaves behind only fragments. Entire commercial centers may disappear through changing river courses, earthquakes, warfare, economic decline, or shifting transportation routes. Once trade moved elsewhere, buildings collapsed, roads deteriorated, and vegetation slowly reclaimed the landscape. Within only a few generations, bustling marketplaces could become little more than faint outlines beneath the soil. Still, certain aspects of the shadow marketplace legend continue to invite curiosity. Some accounts describe merchants offering objects unlike anything known at the time. Others speak of coins bearing unfamiliar symbols that supposedly vanished after changing hands. A few stories even claim visitors returned home carrying valuable goods, only to discover them transformed into ordinary stones or dried leaves by morning. Historians generally interpret such details as symbolic folklore, reflecting cautionary lessons about greed, deception, or misplaced trust rather than literal historical events. Anthropologists note that marketplaces have always occupied a unique position within human society. They brought together strangers from different cultures, religions, and languages, creating environments where ordinary social boundaries temporarily dissolved. News, ideas, technologies, and beliefs traveled alongside merchandise. In many respects, markets represented crossroads between familiar and unfamiliar worlds, making them natural settings for legends blending reality with imagination. Modern psychology offers another perspective. Memory becomes less reliable when people experience unfamiliar environments filled with countless new sights, sounds, and interactions. Travelers covering long distances under physically demanding conditions often reconstructed events afterward, using incomplete details combined with existing cultural expectations. Over time, repeated storytelling smoothed inconsistencies while strengthening the most memorable elements, gradually transforming unusual experiences into enduring legends. More speculative theories have naturally emerged as well. Some writers suggest that certain stories preserve distorted memories of highly secretive trading communities operating beyond the knowledge of established authorities. Others imagine forgotten routes connecting settlements that later disappeared completely from recorded history. More imaginative proposals describe hidden civilizations conducting commerce away from ordinary observation or locations accessible only under exceptional circumstances. Although none of these ideas has been supported by reliable archaeological evidence, they continue attracting attention because history repeatedly demonstrates that entire cities, roads, and trade centers can remain undiscovered for astonishing lengths of time. Researchers continue investigating ancient trade using satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, aerial surveys, isotope analysis, and digital mapping. Every year, newly identified caravan routes reshape our understanding of how extensively ancient civilizations exchanged goods and ideas. Settlements once believed isolated are increasingly recognized as active participants within vast commercial networks stretching across continents. These discoveries lend unexpected depth to old legends. Perhaps travelers who described impossible marketplaces had genuinely encountered temporary trade camps that vanished before others arrived. Perhaps unfamiliar languages and rare merchandise seemed so extraordinary that memory elevated ordinary commerce into something almost mythical. Or perhaps fragments of forgotten history still survive within stories that have not yet yielded all of their meaning. Standing alone at the edge of an overgrown field, the old house appears almost untouched by time. Its faded wooden walls lean ever so slightly, while cracked windows reflect only fragments of the sky above. The porch sags beneath years of neglect, and vines slowly climb across the exterior, weaving through broken railings and empty door frames. No smoke rises from the chimney, no footsteps disturb the dust. Yet, despite its silence, the building carries an unmistakable feeling of presence, as though it continues to observe every visitor who approaches its weathered entrance. Nearly every region has a place like this. It may be an abandoned farmhouse overlooking forgotten fields, a crumbling manor hidden among ancient trees, or an isolated cabin standing beside an empty road. Whatever its appearance, local tradition often gives it the same warning: never enter. Stories surrounding forbidden houses appear in cultures across the world. Although the details change with geography and history, certain themes remain remarkably consistent. Travelers speak of buildings left abandoned under unusual circumstances. Neighbors recall strange lights appearing long after the final occupants disappeared. Others describe unexplained sounds drifting through empty rooms or windows that appear open one day and closed the next, despite the absence of anyone living inside. Many of these stories begin with entirely ordinary events. History is filled with homes abandoned because of economic hardship, natural disasters, disease, changing trade routes, or shifting populations. Entire communities have relocated after prolonged droughts, severe storms, mining collapses, armed conflicts, or declining agricultural conditions. The buildings left behind gradually surrendered to weather, vegetation, and time. As years passed, memories faded while questions remained. Children grew up hearing fragments of stories about the people who once lived there. Names became uncertain. Dates blurred together. Ordinary family tragedies slowly evolved into local legends, each generation adding small details until the house itself became the focus rather than the historical events that first surrounded it. Historians recognize this process as a common feature of oral tradition. When written records disappear, communities often preserve memory through storytelling. Over time, practical warnings become symbolic narratives. A dangerous structure weakened by age may acquire a reputation for unexplained disappearances simply because earlier generations hoped to discourage curious visitors from entering unstable buildings. The legend survives long after the original reason has been forgotten. Yet, certain abandoned houses continue attracting attention for reasons extending beyond folklore alone. Environmental scientists have identified several natural factors capable of producing genuinely unsettling experiences inside neglected buildings. Aging timber expands and contracts as temperatures change, generating creaks that seem surprisingly deliberate. Wind flowing through broken chimneys, narrow hallways, and damaged windows creates low-frequency vibrations that sometimes resemble distant voices or footsteps. Old plumbing, loose metal fixtures, and fractured roofing contribute additional sounds, particularly during periods of changing weather. Combined with echoing empty rooms, these ordinary processes may convince visitors that someone else is moving within the structure. Lighting conditions also play an important role. Human vision performs remarkably well in daylight, but becomes significantly less reliable in dim environments. Reflections from cracked glass, shifting shadows cast by moving branches, and uneven floor surfaces can create convincing visual illusions. A partially open doorway glimpsed from one angle may appear fully closed moments later. Sunlight passing through broken windows produces changing patterns that seem almost animated as clouds drift overhead. Psychology offers another fascinating explanation. Researchers studying expectation and perception have repeatedly demonstrated that prior beliefs strongly influence how people interpret ambiguous surroundings. Individuals entering a building already believed to possess a troubling reputation become more attentive to unfamiliar sounds, subtle movements, and ordinary environmental changes. Experiences that might pass unnoticed elsewhere acquire greater emotional significance within a setting already associated with mystery. This does not imply that witnesses invent what they experience. Instead, it suggests that abandoned buildings naturally combine numerous sensory effects capable of creating unusually vivid impressions. The environment itself encourages heightened awareness, making even ordinary events feel extraordinary. Historical investigations occasionally reveal surprising foundations beneath local legends. Some supposedly cursed houses have later been linked to documented outbreaks of disease, unresolved legal disputes, or tragic accidents largely forgotten by surrounding communities. Others concealed hidden rooms, sealed basements, forgotten tunnels, or architectural features unknown until careful restoration uncovered them. Such discoveries remind historians that legends sometimes preserve fragments of genuine history long after official records have disappeared. Archaeologists and preservation specialists frequently encounter buildings whose original purpose differs considerably from local tradition. Homes believed abandoned overnight may instead have experienced gradual decline over decades. Structures rumored to possess hidden passages occasionally prove to contain practical storage spaces, drainage systems, or defensive features typical of their period. Even so, these practical explanations rarely diminish the fascination surrounding the locations themselves. The emotional atmosphere remains difficult to ignore. Unlike castles, temples, or monumental ruins, houses feel deeply personal. Every room reflects ordinary human life. Kitchens, once filled with conversation, become silent. Bedrooms that sheltered generations stand empty. Children's toys, broken furniture, family photographs, and handwritten notes occasionally survive long after their owners have departed. Such discoveries create an immediate connection between present and past, making abandoned homes uniquely powerful places to explore. Folklore often builds upon that emotional foundation. Many traditions describe houses remembering those who once lived within them. Rather than portraying buildings as inherently dangerous, these stories suggest that places absorb memory through long occupation. Doors, staircases, fireplaces, and windows become silent witnesses to countless ordinary moments until history itself seems embedded within the walls. More speculative interpretations naturally followed. Some writers have suggested that unusual geological conditions beneath certain buildings influence human perception through subtle vibrations or naturally occurring electromagnetic fields. Others imagine forgotten architectural practices intended to produce unusual acoustic effects within enclosed spaces. More imaginative theories speak of locations where emotional experiences somehow linger beyond those who originally lived there. Although none of these proposals has received conclusive scientific support, they continue attracting interest because abandoned houses often produce experiences that feel surprisingly difficult to describe. Modern investigators approach these locations using increasingly sophisticated techniques. Structural engineers analyze aging construction methods. Environmental scientists measure air quality, mold growth, temperature variation, and infrasound. Historians examine property records, census documents, newspapers, and family archives to reconstruct the lives once connected to these forgotten buildings. Every discipline contributes another layer of understanding, gradually separating documented history from accumulated legend. Yet, even after careful investigation, certain questions remain unanswered. Why do some abandoned houses disappear quietly into obscurity, while others become lasting centers of local folklore? Why do remarkably similar stories emerge in communities separated by vast distances and entirely different cultures? Is it simply because empty homes awaken universal emotions connected to memory, absence, and the passage of time? Or do these places preserve fragments of history in ways not easily measured? As evening settles over the old structure, fading sunlight slips through cracked windows before surrendering to gathering darkness. The wind stirs loose boards, carrying faint echoes through vacant rooms that have stood undisturbed for generations. Whether every legend surrounding the house that should never be entered can ultimately be traced to environmental conditions, forgotten history, and the remarkable power of human memory, or whether some abandoned doorways still guard stories waiting to be rediscovered, remains uncertain. For now, the weathered house continues standing exactly where it always has, patiently keeping whatever secrets time has chosen to leave behind. Dense fog reduces visibility while distorting familiar landmarks. Flowing water produces continuous background noise capable of masking other sounds. Endless stretches of similar vegetation make navigation increasingly difficult. Together, these factors create conditions in which orientation, confidence, and memory naturally become less reliable. Psychologists identify another fascinating possibility. Human identity depends heavily upon context. Familiar surroundings continually reinforce memory through recognizable people, places, routines, and objects. Remove those reference points, and individuals may temporarily experience subtle disruptions in autobiographical recall. This effect becomes particularly noticeable during prolonged isolation or exposure to entirely unfamiliar environments. Crossing a great river into unknown territory therefore represented more than geographical movement. It marked psychological transition as well. Archaeology provides additional insight into why rivers inspired enduring legends. Throughout history, waterways served as highways linking civilizations separated by enormous distances. Trade goods, languages, religious ideas, artistic traditions, and technological innovations traveled along rivers with remarkable efficiency. Excavations repeatedly uncover evidence of diverse communities meeting beside river crossings, exchanging goods and knowledge over many centuries. Such locations naturally became centers of storytelling. Travelers arriving from distant lands brought unfamiliar customs and remarkable tales. Every crossing introduced opportunities for misunderstanding, translation difficulties, and cultural exchange. Stories changed as they passed between communities, gradually absorbing symbolic meanings reflecting local beliefs. Some rivers gained particularly powerful reputations because of their physical characteristics. Underground springs occasionally emerged with unusual mineral content affecting taste and color. Seasonal flooding transformed familiar landscapes almost overnight. Powerful currents concealed submerged hazards capable of sweeping away boats without warning. To ancient observers lacking modern geological knowledge, these dramatic changes suggested rivers possessed personalities of their own. Many mythologies therefore assigned rivers individual identities. Some were believed to grant wisdom. Others purified those entering their waters. Still others marked boundaries between ordinary existence and something beyond everyday experience. Within Greek mythology, for example, several rivers possess distinct symbolic roles connected to memory, forgetting, justice, or transition. Although these stories belong to mythology rather than documented history, they illustrate how naturally ancient societies associated flowing water with changes affecting the human mind. The river that took names appears to belong within this broader tradition. Yet, modern science has uncovered intriguing details that unexpectedly complement portions of the legend. Researchers studying environmental psychology have demonstrated that unfamiliar landscapes significantly influence perception and memory formation. Individuals navigating challenging terrain devote greater mental resources to immediate survival, reducing attention available for recalling unrelated information. This temporary cognitive shift becomes especially noticeable during physically demanding journeys. Hydrologists likewise point out that large river systems generate surprisingly complex soundscapes. Constant, low-frequency water movement affects concentration differently than intermittent environmental sounds. Combined with changing weather, reflections from water surfaces, and dense vegetation, these acoustic environments create subtle sensory experiences unlike those encountered elsewhere. Could such conditions contribute to stories of forgotten names? Perhaps indirectly. No scientific evidence suggests rivers erase memory through mysterious forces. Yet, history repeatedly demonstrates how demanding environments influence human cognition in ways earlier generations naturally interpreted through folklore. Still, certain reports continue attracting attention. Some local traditions describe travelers who confidently answered every question except those involving their own identity. Others tell of individuals remembering names only after leaving the valley behind. While historians generally regard these accounts as legendary rather than factual, their consistency across widely separated regions remains noteworthy. Dense fog reduces visibility while distorting familiar landmarks. Flowing water produces continuous background noise capable of masking other sounds. Endless stretches of similar vegetation make navigation increasingly difficult. Together, these factors create conditions in which orientation, confidence, and memory naturally become less reliable. Psychologists identify another fascinating possibility. Human identity depends heavily upon context. Familiar surroundings continually reinforce memory through recognizable people, places, routines, and objects. Remove those reference points, and individuals may temporarily experience subtle disruptions in autobiographical recall. This effect becomes particularly noticeable during prolonged isolation or exposure to entirely unfamiliar environments. Crossing a great river into unknown territory therefore represented more than geographical movement. It marked psychological transition as well. Archaeology provides additional insight into why rivers inspired enduring legends. Throughout history, waterways served as highways linking civilizations separated by enormous distances. Trade goods, languages, religious ideas, artistic traditions, and technological innovations traveled along rivers with remarkable efficiency. Excavations repeatedly uncover evidence of diverse communities meeting beside river crossings, exchanging goods and knowledge over many centuries. Such locations naturally became centers of storytelling. Travelers arriving from distant lands brought unfamiliar customs and remarkable tales. Every crossing introduced opportunities for misunderstanding, translation difficulties, and cultural exchange. Stories changed as they passed between communities, gradually absorbing symbolic meanings reflecting local beliefs. Some rivers gained particularly powerful reputations because of their physical characteristics. Underground springs occasionally emerged with unusual mineral content affecting taste and color. Seasonal flooding transformed familiar landscapes almost overnight. Powerful currents concealed submerged hazards capable of sweeping away boats without warning. To ancient observers lacking modern geological knowledge, these dramatic changes suggested rivers possessed personalities of their own. Many mythologies therefore assigned rivers individual identities. Some were believed to grant wisdom. Others purified those entering their waters. Still others marked boundaries between ordinary existence and something beyond everyday experience. Within Greek mythology, for example, several rivers possessed distinct symbolic roles connected to memory, forgetting, justice, or transition. Although these stories belong to mythology rather than documented history, they illustrate how naturally ancient societies associated flowing water with changes affecting the human mind. The river that took names appears to belong within this broader tradition. Yet, modern science has uncovered intriguing details that unexpectedly complement portions of the legend. Researchers studying environmental psychology have demonstrated that unfamiliar landscapes significantly influence perception and memory formation. Individuals navigating challenging terrain devote greater mental resources to immediate survival, reducing attention available for recalling unrelated information. This temporary cognitive shift becomes especially noticeable during physically demanding journeys. Hydrologists likewise point out that large river systems generate surprisingly complex soundscapes. Constant, low-frequency water movement affects concentration differently than intermittent environmental sounds. Combined with changing weather, reflections from water surfaces, and dense vegetation, these acoustic environments create subtle sensory experiences unlike those encountered elsewhere. Could such conditions contribute to stories of forgotten names? Perhaps indirectly. No scientific evidence suggests rivers erase memory through mysterious forces. Yet, history repeatedly demonstrates how demanding environments influence human cognition in ways earlier generations naturally interpreted through folklore. Still, certain reports continue attracting attention. Some local traditions describe travelers who confidently answered every question except those involving their own identity. Others tell of individuals remembering names only after leaving the valley behind. While historians generally regard these accounts as legendary rather than factual, their consistency across widely separated regions remains noteworthy. An old stone bridge stretches gracefully across a slow-moving river, its weathered arches reflected perfectly in the calm water below. Moss clings to every crack between the stones, while ivy slowly climbs the ancient parapets that have overlooked the valley for hundreds of years. During the day, the crossing appears peaceful, serving as little more than a reminder of the generations who once depended upon it. But as evening settles and mist begins rising from the river, the bridge takes on an entirely different character. The familiar landscape softens into shifting silhouettes, distant sounds become strangely difficult to identify, and every footstep seems to echo just a little longer than expected. For centuries, places like this have been known by many names, but one description appears with remarkable consistency throughout history: the Bridge of Spirits. Unlike legends tied to a single landmark, stories of haunted or sacred bridges appear in nearly every culture. Whether built across mountain rivers, deep ravines, marshlands, or quiet streams, these crossings have inspired traditions suggesting they serve as more than physical connections between two pieces of land. According to countless stories, they also mark invisible boundaries between the familiar world and something far less easily explained. At first glance, such beliefs seem purely symbolic. Yet bridges have always occupied a unique position within human civilization. Long before modern transportation, rivers represented some of the greatest obstacles travelers faced. A dependable bridge transformed trade, communication, migration, and political influence. Entire towns emerged around important crossings, while kingdoms competed fiercely to control them. A bridge often determined whether armies advanced, merchants prospered, or isolated communities remained connected to the outside world. Because of this importance, bridges naturally accumulated stories. Thousands upon thousands of people cross them every year. Merchants carrying valuable cargo, pilgrims traveling toward sacred destinations, soldiers returning from distant campaigns, families beginning new lives in unfamiliar places, messengers delivering news capable of changing the course of history. Every crossing became a stage upon which countless personal stories unfolded. Some ended in celebration. Others ended in grief. It required little imagination for later generations to believe that such emotionally significant places retained echoes of those who had passed before. Historical records reveal that many ancient bridges also served ceremonial purposes. In Roman society, bridge construction held religious significance, involving carefully observed rituals intended to ensure divine protection. Medieval Europe preserved blessings associated with newly completed bridges, while many Asian traditions regarded important crossings as spiritually significant locations, requiring acts of respect before travelers continued their journeys. Anthropologists suggest these customs reflected a universal understanding. Crossing a bridge represented transition. One side belonged to the known, the other belonged to uncertainty. This symbolism appears repeatedly throughout mythology. Ancient Persian traditions describe bridges separating earthly existence from the next stage of existence. Norse mythology speaks of the rainbow bridge connecting different realms. Japanese folklore includes numerous stories of bridges where supernatural encounters occur during quiet evenings. Chinese legends often portray bridges as meeting places between the living and departed. Although these traditions differ greatly, they share one remarkable theme. A bridge is never merely a structure. It represents passage. That symbolic meaning may explain why so many ghost stories became attached to such locations. Medieval chronicles occasionally describe travelers encountering unfamiliar figures upon isolated bridges late at night. In many accounts, the stranger vanished immediately after the crossing was completed. Local folklore gradually expanded these stories, introducing mysterious travelers, silent monks, soldiers in outdated uniforms, grieving women, wandering children, or unnamed figures who appeared only during particular weather conditions. Modern folklorists emphasize that such stories evolved over centuries through repeated retelling rather than documented historical events. Yet, their persistence remains striking. Even communities separated by oceans developed remarkably similar legends without direct cultural contact. Psychology offers one compelling explanation. Bridges naturally heighten human awareness. Unlike ordinary roads, they restrict movement to narrow pathways suspended above flowing water or steep terrain. The surrounding environment changes abruptly. Sounds behave differently. Wind accelerates through confined spaces. Many early stone bridges genuinely represented astonishing engineering accomplishments for their time. Communities unfamiliar with advanced construction techniques naturally regarded such structures with awe. Over generations, admiration gradually transformed into stories explaining remarkable craftsmanship through equally remarkable means. The legends endured because the bridges themselves continued standing. Centuries later, many remain functional today. Archaeology has repeatedly demonstrated that ancient engineers possessed knowledge often underestimated by later observers. Sophisticated foundations, carefully calculated arches, advanced stone cutting, hydrological planning, drainage systems capable of surviving countless seasonal floods. These practical achievements proved impressive enough without requiring supernatural explanations. Even so, folklore surrounding the structures continued flourishing alongside historical reality. More speculative interpretations eventually appeared. Some writers proposed that bridges built above unusual geological formations exposed travelers to subtle environmental influences affecting perception. Others suggested naturally occurring infrasound generated by moving water might contribute to sensations occasionally reported at certain locations. Low-frequency sound has indeed been shown to influence human comfort under particular circumstances, although no evidence connects this directly to stories of apparitions. More imaginative theories describe bridges as places where different dimensions briefly overlap, allowing fleeting encounters with unexplained phenomena. Others suggest emotionally significant events somehow leave lasting impressions upon physical locations, occasionally becoming perceptible under exceptional environmental conditions. None of these ideas has received convincing scientific confirmation. Yet, their popularity illustrates the enduring fascination inspired by transitional places. Modern researchers approach famous bridge legends from multiple disciplines simultaneously. Historians reconstruct documented events. Engineers analyze structural behavior. Geologists examine surrounding landscapes. Meteorologists study localized weather patterns. Psychologists investigate environmental perception. Acoustic specialists map sound propagation. Archaeologists continue uncovering forgotten details beneath centuries of accumulated stone. Together, these fields reveal something remarkable. Even when supernatural explanations prove unnecessary, the bridges themselves remain extraordinary. They preserve engineering, history, memory, symbolism, and human experience within a single location. Perhaps that explains why stories continue emerging even today. Visitors occasionally describe unusual encounters while photographing historic bridges at dawn. Others report hearing unexplained footsteps that ultimately prove impossible to locate. Some notice figures reflected briefly upon the water before realizing no one stands nearby. Most experiences receive ordinary explanations involving light, weather, acoustics, or simple misunderstanding. A smaller number remain unresolved, not because they necessarily require extraordinary causes, but because available evidence proves insufficient to reach certainty. Folklorists argue that uncertainty itself forms the heart of such legends. The Bridge of Spirits does not demand belief. It invites reflection. Every traveler crossing an ancient bridge participates in a tradition extending backward through countless generations. Thousands have paused upon the same stones, watched the same current, listened to the same wind, wondered about those who crossed long before them. That continuity transforms an ordinary structure into something carrying profound emotional weight. Perhaps the true mystery has never concerned unseen figures at all. Perhaps it lies in the remarkable ability of certain places to preserve human memory across centuries. Bridges connect more than opposite riverbanks. They connect different eras, different cultures, different lives. Every worn stone bears silent witness to conversations forgotten, reunions celebrated, farewells whispered, promises made, and journeys begun whose endings history never recorded. The mountain rises above the surrounding valleys with an almost commanding presence. Its rocky slopes are scarred by centuries of wind, rain, and winter frost, while dense forests blanket its lower ridges in deep shades of green. Clouds often gather around its summit even on otherwise clear days, concealing the highest cliffs behind shifting curtains of mist. At dawn, sunlight slowly reaches the upper stone before descending into the valleys below, as though the mountain awakens on its own schedule rather than following the rhythm of the world around it. From a distance, it appears ancient but ordinary. Up close, however, every trail seems to hint at something older than memory itself. Hidden among weathered outcrops are narrow fissures leading into darkness. Small caves disappear beneath tangled roots. Collapsed entrances suggest tunnels that once reached far beneath the surface before time sealed them away. Local shepherds, hunters, and travelers have pointed toward these openings for centuries, speaking quietly of chambers where no ordinary visitor should linger. According to one of history's most enduring legends, somewhere beneath a mountain like this rests a king who never truly died. He sleeps. His warriors sleep beside him. His weapons remain untouched. His banners wait silently in darkness. And when the land faces its greatest hour of need, the mountain will open, allowing the forgotten ruler to return once more. This tradition appears across remarkable distances. Although each culture tells the story differently, historians have identified strikingly similar legends throughout Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, and beyond. The ruler changes. The mountain changes. The historical setting changes. Yet the central image remains almost identical. A hidden king, an underground chamber, a timeless sleep, a promised return. Some traditions speak of legendary emperors whose armies vanished after catastrophic battles. Others describe noble rulers who withdrew willingly beneath sacred mountains rather than witnessing the collapse of their kingdoms. Still others claim the king remains alive, preserved by forces beyond ordinary understanding until destiny calls him back. At first glance, these stories belong comfortably within mythology, yet their persistence has fascinated historians for generations. Why would societies separated by geography, language, and religion preserve such remarkably similar traditions? Part of the answer may lie within history itself. Throughout antiquity and the medieval world, mountains occupied a unique place in human imagination. Unlike rivers, forests, or plains, mountains appeared permanent. Empires rose beneath them. Empires disappeared. The mountains remained. For communities experiencing invasion, political collapse, famine, or social upheaval, mountains represented stability in an uncertain world. It is perhaps natural that legends of enduring kings found their homes within landscapes that themselves seemed eternal. Archaeology adds another intriguing dimension. Ancient civilizations frequently used mountains for ceremonial purposes. Sacred caves became places of worship. Burial chambers were carved deep into stone. Monasteries occupied remote cliffs. Hidden fortresses overlooked strategic valleys. In numerous regions, rulers deliberately associated themselves with mountains to symbolize permanence, authority, and divine protection. Many such sites remain only partially explored today. Natural cave systems complicate investigation enormously. Some passages extend for miles beneath the surface. Others collapse unexpectedly. Groundwater slowly reshapes underground chambers over thousands of years, concealing earlier structures beneath layers of mineral deposits. Modern laser mapping continues revealing previously unknown voids inside mountains once believed fully understood. Occasionally, archaeology uncovers remarkable surprises. Entire temple complexes hidden within cliffs. Royal tombs concealed beneath natural rock formations. Underground cities connected by elaborate tunnel networks. Storage chambers sealed for centuries. Every discovery reminds researchers that mountains often preserve history exceptionally well. This reality inevitably encourages speculation. If hidden cities exist, if forgotten shrines remain undiscovered, could other secrets still rest beneath the stone? Historical records contribute additional complexity. Several medieval chronicles describe rulers whose deaths were surrounded by uncertainty. Some disappeared during military campaigns without confirmed burial sites. Others vanished during political upheaval. A few rulers were rumored to have survived long after official accounts declared them dead. Without reliable documentation, legend naturally filled the gaps left by incomplete history. Memory transformed disappearance into expectation. Death became sleep. Absence became waiting. The king would return. Others imagine carefully concealed royal sanctuaries protecting valuable knowledge during periods of political collapse. A handful propose hidden chambers containing historical archives awaiting rediscovery beneath remote mountain ranges. None of these ideas has received convincing archaeological confirmation. Even so, history occasionally rewards patience. Entire civilizations, once considered mythical, have later emerged through excavation. Cities described only in legend have been located beneath accumulated earth. Royal tombs, thought permanently lost, have reappeared after centuries of searching. The distinction between myth and history sometimes proves less absolute than earlier generations assumed. Literature also played an important role. Stories of sleeping kings spread widely through medieval poetry, heroic epics, and oral tradition. Each retelling strengthened the legend while adapting it to local history. One kingdom remembered its greatest ruler, another honored a beloved defender. Elsewhere, forgotten tribal leaders became immortal guardians resting beneath nearby mountains. Different names, different histories, the same enduring hope. Even today, these legends continue shaping cultural identity. Festivals celebrate returning kings. Mountain caves attract curious visitors. Ancient songs preserve fragments of narratives passed from one generation to the next. Children grow up hearing stories first told hundreds of years earlier. Although few interpret them literally, many regard them as valuable connections to ancestral memory. Anthropologists emphasize that such traditions preserve more than entertainment. They encode historical experience, political upheaval, migration, conflict, resilience, loss, renewal. The Sleeping King becomes a symbolic archive preserving emotional truths that official chronicles often overlook. Scientists approaching these legends rarely seek supernatural confirmation. Instead, they ask different questions. What historical events inspired the story? Which geographical features encouraged its development? How accurately does oral tradition preserve ancient memory? Why do similar themes emerge independently across distant cultures? Each investigation reveals additional complexity. Sometimes, folklore exaggerates genuine history. Sometimes, history unexpectedly validates portions of folklore. Neither discipline entirely replaces the other. Together, they offer richer understanding than either could achieve alone. Standing before the mountain today, it becomes surprisingly easy to appreciate how these stories endured. The landscape itself encourages contemplation. Towering cliffs dwarf human ambition. Ancient forests soften the passage of centuries. Hidden caves invite endless curiosity. Every valley conceals another ridge beyond sight. Every summit reveals another horizon waiting farther away. One begins to understand why generations imagined entire worlds existing beneath the stone. Perhaps the greatest mystery has never concerned whether a forgotten king literally sleeps inside the mountain. Perhaps the deeper question asks why humanity continues returning to the same story across thousands of years. Why do we imagine wisdom waiting in hidden places? Why do mountains become guardians of unfinished history? Why does the hope of return remain so deeply woven into collective memory? As twilight settles across the high slopes, the last sunlight lingers upon the summit before fading into gathering shadow. The mountain grows quiet once again, revealing nothing beyond weathered rock, ancient trees, and silent cliffs that have watched civilizations rise and disappear. Somewhere beneath that immense weight of stone may rest forgotten tunnels, undiscovered chambers, or simply the ordinary geology of an ancient landscape. Yet the legend endures because certainty remains just beyond reach. Whether the king under the mountain belongs entirely to mythology, preserves fragments of historical memory, or quietly points toward discoveries that future generations have yet to uncover, no one can say with confidence. Until every hidden passage has been explored and every forgotten chamber brought back into the light, the mountain will continue standing exactly as it always has, silent, patient, and guarding whatever truths still lie hidden within its depths.